folks. This is Risk, the show where people tell true stories they never thought they'd dare to share. I'm Kevin Allison, and this is one of our new video format episodes. So if you're listening to the audio podcast, just know there's a link in the show notes to the video version over on YouTube. And if you're watching the video version over on YouTube, know that you should also check out our audio podcast. Risk has been sharing jaw-dropping true stories for over 15 years, and you can find it wherever you get your podcasts or at risk-show.com. Now today, we are featuring Unbreakable, one of the classic Risk stories. It's by Melanie Hamlett. She told it first on Risk in 2016. Melanie now has a huge following on TikTok where she shares especially about issues pertaining to women's wisdom that men and women could really benefit from hearing. And so after we hear Melanie's 2016 story, Melanie in 2025 is going to have a conversation with a friend of hers, Miss Aishia, who is a therapist and who also has a huge TikTok following where she shares about women's wisdom. So we've got two TikTok powerhouses and brilliant feminists discussing one heck of a story today. Speaking of that, I should warn you, this is a story about an abusive relationship. There is violence, there's rape, there's stalking. It's a lot. So I just want to give you a heads up about that. So without further ado, here they are, Melanie Hamlett and Miss Aishia.
Hey everyone, Melanie here. So today we're going to be listening to Unbreakable again, which I told 9 years ago. And like any good story, I have way more perspective and wisdom and insight on this whole experience. But I'm also going to be kind of deconstructing this story with one of my favorite therapists of all time that I met on TikTok, and we're friends now. She's got like hundreds of thousands of followers because she's amazing. And she specializes in all these things like childhood trauma, codependency, unhealthy relationships, domestic violence. She's a survivor herself. She's worked with abusers. She knows more about domestic violence than maybe anyone I've ever met. And she's also a college professor and is just so cool too. So Miss Aishia, thank you for joining us today to talk about this story. And I can't wait to hear what you're going to say.
Yes. And, sharing your story and thinking about all of the similarities to exactly what I've experienced, to what my clients have experienced, I think is going to be such a vibe. I really do.
Yeah, I can't wait. All right. So let's get into it. Here is my story from 9 years ago, Unbreakable. So I left New York City with the intention of probably moving to LA, but I stopped in Taos, New Mexico, because it's kind of like a home base for me. I've spent a lot of time there, and it's a soul-searching type place. Before I decided even to leave New York, I'd gone to Taos for a wedding, and I walked into the pizza place to visit my friend who owns the pizza place. And I saw this guy kneading dough, which is like the hottest thing to watch if he's like a very good looking. I mean, you're just like, that's my boob, that's my butt, you know what I mean? Oh, and he's just like slapping it. And I was just like, who is that? I mean, I didn't say, I casually was like, who's that guy? Oh, that's Jesse, I'm like, oh, okay. And I was just visiting on vacation, but I remember thinking, And then months later, when I came back to actually kind of move there for a little while and just kind of figure out what I'm going to do, I thought I was going to be writing my book. My friend gave me a job at this pizza place, and there he was. Good old Jesse needing that dough. And he looked at me like in a way where I was like, oh, he knows that I know, and I don't really have chemistry with a lot of guys. And at this point in my life, I had been working really, really hard on trying to learn how to have a relationship. All I'd had up till this point was one-night stands, hate fucks, or long periods of abstinence. Twice in my life, in college and in my 20s, I went 5 years without fucking or kissing or even touching a single guy. Well, in college, I kissed a couple, but that was it, because I was so afraid of losing myself in a relationship. I was like big, tough, outdoors woman, and I didn't want that to go away because I knew men were my weakness. And I was afraid of intimacy. I was terrified of getting hurt. So I worked up to this place where I was finally ready to have a relationship because I'd had a few like mini relationships and realized what I was missing and how wonderful this might be. And I also had really high self-esteem, finally. After like years of self-destruction and all this stuff, I finally really liked who I was. If you don't like yourself, that will ruin your relationship. So I was in such a good place when I showed up in Taos. So, there was the flirting, there was just this attraction. He was also like super outdoorsy looking, which is my type. He had like one of those it was not quite like a ZZ Top beard, but it was a little on the long side. He had like, the plaid shirt, like long sleeve shirt rolled up, and he had like these tattoos. He had like one of those smiles where his chin goes out, so it's like almost childlike. He was just like hot. He always laughed at my jokes, which is always a turn on for me because I like it when guys laugh at my jokes. I knew right away he wasn't the smartest guy. Like, he'd never been to college. Like, I couldn't actually have, like, intellectual conversations with him or whatever. But he had the same life experience. He had the same, like, life education that very few people do. I thought, well, this guy's like me, because I've been a raft guide and a ski instructor. I lived in my truck for 5 years. I've been a nomad. I've lived all over South America and Europe and, never set roots myself. He rides the rails. He rode the rails for 10 years. And he loved my stories of travel and stuff. We had this thing, we had this connection of being like free spirits. He seemed so drawn to me and like weak in the knees. And I'm not used to that kind of attention from men. And I'm not really used to someone being that crazy about me. So my ego really loved that. But I knew from experience that fucking a guy on the first day or fucking a guy right away never works out in my favor because then I get dickmatized, right? Because my vagina, especially if they're good and what they're doing, my vagina always gets veto power over logic and my heart and my intuition. That's how I've ended up in so many terrible situations. So I knew I should not sleep with this person right away because I actually liked him. And we worked together. And, there's nothing hotter than like having a forbidden romance. And we're at this pizza place where the kitchen staff can see the wait staff. Like there's just a big open kind of window. There's no wall there. So he'd be literally kneading that dough, looking at me like he wants to fuck my brains out. And then when he'd stop, he'd pick up his phone and text me like some really dirty shit. We'd be texting each other through this window without anybody knowing and like just getting away with it. I knew that I shouldn't do this because my friend owns this business and I don't want to bring drama into this business, and relationships always have drama. So we would like go out to the shed. I would like go out to the shed to get some Cokes, and he would go out there and he'd be smoking a cigarette, and then we'd have like secret hugs. And like the buildup was so intense. Like I totally fell for him before I even had sex with him. But what really got me was, so first of all, like I found out that my book did not sell. So now I'm in a town in the middle of nowhere and I have no idea why I'm there or what I'm going to do. The kicker was our dishwasher at work died in a terrible drunk driving accident. And I was really upset by it, and everybody was. And we went to his funeral, and at his funeral, I see like the mother of our friend, whose son has just died. She comes up to us and thanks us for being there, and he just gives her this hug and she cries on his shoulder. And I was like, oh, wow, like he is like a really emotionally mature guy. He's not afraid to cry. And that's really hard to come across in men, guys who aren't afraid to cry in front of women. Like that really and we've just bonded over like crying about this loss. So it was just the perfect storm for me to just fall into something really intense with someone. I was lost and he was there. I've been so guarded and never let men do things for me. I'm the opposite of damsel in distress. Like, to a fault, I don't let men help me. And I remember one day I woke up and I went to go get in my truck, and the tire was flat. And like the tires on my truck are really hard to get off because there's so much rust and stuff. Like even men can't get it off. And I remember thinking, well, I could call AAA. But I also could just call Jesse and see if he wants to do it, because I'd never let myself go down that road. And he was like, I'll be right over. He came over, and watching him fix my tire was the hottest thing other than kneading dough that I've ever seen. And I mean, it took him a while to get that thing off because it was like really on there. And then afterwards I was like, do you want to come inside? Because it's the first time he'd ever been to my house. I created all these rules because I didn't trust myself. So I was like, we can't touch, no touching, you know what I mean? And like, can't hook up, you know, no kissing. So he's sitting in the chair and I'm sitting on the ottoman right in front of him and we're talking. And then he basically just like looks over at me and like lifts me up and puts me on his lap. And I'm like the strong, tough woman. And I'm like, oh, wow. You know, like I liked that he was kind of took charge. And so we're sitting there and like, we can't touch. I was like, you know, no kissing. And so he's like, oh, I'm not. And he just basically rubs his nose. Like we like have our cheeks next to each other. And then he just rubs his nose slowly all over my face. And then just like his hands caress my arms. I'm wearing all my clothes. I can feel his boner, but like we're not going there, you know, it's just caressing, which I love, but no one ever caresses me. You're a single woman, no one ever touches you, and, you know, unless you're in a relationship. And I was just like, ugh. And then he basically just went along my entire body. He didn't put me on the bed and caress my entire body with like his nose or his hands without actually touching any of my like pink parts. And it's the most erotic thing I've ever experienced. Way better than any sex I've ever had. It's just this buildup of anticipation, you know? But I had still told myself, no, we're not kissing though. My body's already fallen for him, even though he's never been inside of it. I just figured I'm like the Jane Goodall of people. I am fascinated by human beings. You know, I love going anywhere and just being like, wow, like, I just want to know everything about you. So, I mean, I was fascinated by him and his life. He held my hand in public. And I don't really remember anyone doing that, or at least doing that with someone that I wasn't ashamed to be holding my hand. And he washed my hair when we would shower together. I never showered with anyone before. I was like, oh, I didn't know this was a thing. Like, you could do this. And he would wash my hair, and it was so tender. Like, he would hold my head in an angle so that the water spout wouldn't go right into my ear. You know, when I was driving my truck, I have a stick shift, and he would put his hand on top of mine and, like, lace his fingers with mine. And, like, little things like that. I think I fell in love with that. I've always been known as this, like, sexual woman who's like, you know, and, like, emotionally uninvolved. But fuck, dude, I'm a woman. And I'm a human being, and I want love, and I want affection, and I want all of those things, you know, that I've always told people I don't need or want. And this is the first time I was able to actually acknowledge that, and it felt really fucking good, you know? When I first met him, we were flirting, and then like 2 weeks into flirting, I heard him talk about how his girlfriend was going to come pick him up at work. And I was like, wait, what? And we got in this fight over, it's like, why didn't you tell me you had a girlfriend? I've been flirting with you this whole time. And he was like, well, she's not really my girlfriend. Like, we live together and we're pretty much broken up, but I just haven't gotten a new place yet. So we're just kind of friends. Like, we don't even sleep together or whatever. And you know that she had a whole different story. So it was also this forbidden romance in that level, because I'm like, well, clearly these two are not meant to be together. And like, that was another reason why I was holding off too, is I didn't want to be the other woman. As soon as we started having sex, then, I mean, you know, my heart and my vagina are connected for the first time in my life, you know, and then I basically start falling in love with this person. I became really jealous and was just like, wait a second, like, I don't want to be someone's side dish. And now I am the side dish. Now I'm this other woman, and it makes me feel bad about myself, and it's not fair to her. You know, I was texting him about this a lot, being like, dude, you need to leave. You need to leave her, or you can't fuck me anymore. And, you know, some of his texts that he would send back were just full of excuses and not taking responsibility for how inconsiderate it was to me and her. I remember sitting in my chair in my house, and I read this one text. I basically called him out on something that he totally did, like something, they went on some trip, and he told me some detail, and I was like, look, until you get out of this relationship, I don't want to know any details about you and your girlfriend. Like, do you have any idea how hard this is for me to like you and know that you're not available to me? And his text back was, along the lines of gaslighting, where he totally avoided taking responsibility for his part in this. Or he blamed her. Well, she's such a bitch and won't let me leave or something like that. And I remember thinking, wait a second, she's a victim in this situation. This isn't her fault. This is not the kind of text I want to get from someone I want to date. I mean, that's my intuition screaming at me like, come on, it's not too late. You're not actually dating this person. You're just really attached to him. And I thought, I don't care. I made that willful decision that day. I don't care. What's the worst that can happen? I'm not here that long. I'm going to move to LA at some point. Like, I'm already in this. So I'm like, fuck it. The ego wants what it wants. It doesn't care what the intuition wants. I had a trip planned to come out and see LA, see if I really wanted to move here. And I basically gave him an ultimatum before I left. And I was like, look, I'm not doing this anymore. It's killing my self-esteem. It's hurting her. You're being really selfish and you need to make a decision. Part of me, that intuitive part was kind of like, good, this will be 3 weeks away from him. You will get over him. Like, by the time you come back, you'll be strong. But there was that part of me that was like, yeah, I'm doing an ultimatum and he better break up with that girl. And when I was away, he broke up with her. He moved out of her house and moved into a backpack. And so in Joshua Tree on a climb, 100, 200 feet in the air, and my cell phone worked for the first time in days. And I got that text and he goes, I left her. My gut reaction was like, oh, fuck. The rest of me was like, well, okay, cool. Like, we can be together, but my gut reaction was like, He told me to pick him up at the coffee shop, and he had a banjo in a backpack. And he put it in the back of my truck, and I guess we're going to my house. And I remember laughing myself, I'm dating someone who has a banjo and a backpack, and that's it. So I set some rules, okay, look, I know you don't have a home, but you can't stay at my house every night. So he's like, no, it's fine. Me and one of our coworkers, they borrowed someone's van, another coworker's van, and all three of them were living in a van down by the river. I even went and visited him at the campground once, and the guy slept outside and let me sleep in the van with him, but down by the river. When this van's a rockin', don't come a knockin', So, in the beginning, I had these rules, only 3 nights a week. Because I know from all of my friends, what good rules are in a relationship in terms of, how to have a healthy relationship. That lasted not long because, his guy with the van ended up moving into another town, and now he's and then it just I even got him a house sitting gig at my friend's house just to give him a place that wasn't mine so that I wouldn't get, immersed in this person. I got him dog sitting gigs. One of my friends even offered to let him have a truck so he could even live in his own truck so that he had a home base, because I just intuitively knew that my home is very important to me and I'm not ready to move in with someone. I just fucking started dating him, I'd never been in a relationship before, and I'm used to doing everything on my own, traveling on my own, which I like, but you get to a point in your life where it gets lonely, and when you're this old, you can't meet people everywhere you go because it's just, it's hard. And so after we finally were together, we started taking adventures every weekend. And this is literally the first time in my life I've ever had a travel partner. So fun. And he travels like I do. He just goes with the flow. We ended up in all these crazy conversations with people because he's as open as I am. He'll talk to anybody. It was just nice knowing we got in a couple situations when we were camping where we got a gun pulled on us, and I felt really good knowing that I have a man with me in case anything weird happens. I'm not used to having someone who might protect me. But even on those trips, he just would, lose his temper over the weirdest shit. And at work, every time a male customer would come in, because he could watch me, remember, there's no window, he would be like, why were you flirting with that guy? He would start harassing me at work with these texts. I'm like, I'm not flirting with that guy. He ordered a large pizza with cheese and pepperoni. And you have to make it now. That's your job. We're doing our jobs here, And he was like he was drunk on anger and jealousy, and you can't reason with someone in that state. And like we would have a fight over that, and I'm like, you can't talk to me that way. I'm going to talk to whoever I want. You're going to have to get over it. But those fights weren't very often, but they started getting more and more. And with relationships like this, they beat you down because they get madder and madder more often. And then you just stop talking because you don't want to deal with having that fucking fight again. Of being like, no, I'm not fucking him. I'm fucking you. I'm just sharing a piece of pizza with him because it's free, and clearly I'm not flirting with him. And it got to the point where things like started to actually frighten me, his jealousy and his anger. The longer we were together, the more I realized I'm his fucking mother, not his partner. I'm dating a 2-year-old. I remember one day, so he had back problems. He wouldn't go to the doctor. Wouldn't take care of himself. I finally made him go after we had this big, terrible blowout at a Renaissance festival. Because he got mad that his costume was stupid and I looked super hot in mine, and that some of the other fucking knights were like talking to me. He'd be like, all those guys, they just want to fuck you. And I'm like, I just asked the knights to take a picture with me because they're wearing cool costumes. Like everything was about me wanting to fuck some other man. And for the first time in my life, I didn't want to fuck another man. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like so horny. I'm always thinking about sex. I'm always looking for guys I can fuck. I'm almost like a dude in that way. I'm like always looking for that. And for the first time in my life, I don't want to fuck anyone but him. I'm totally loyal to this person. And yet everything I do, he thinks I'm trying to fuck some other dude. And that whole thing ended up when we were in a hotel room that night, him pitching a fit about that and the fact I wouldn't like loan him money so he could buy a kilt. And he like threw a jar across the room, and it really scared me. And I was like, oh shit, he's someone who throws stuff. Uh-oh. Because it hadn't escalated to that yet, But he always used his back hurting to justify it because he had tweaked his back. So I was like always rubbing his back, trying to make his back feel better, trying to get him to go to the doctor. He never would. So after that trip, I was like, look, you need to go to the hospital. We got to deal with your back. On the way to the emergency room, we stopped by my house because, again, he would be very upset at the hospital if we had to wait. So I packed basically a diaper bag for my fucking 2-year-old. I got some books, I got a Kindle, I got some snacks, so Jesse won't get mad. And then in the hospital room, we ended up waiting for like 12 hours, which would really weigh on anybody. But by the time we got our own room, he was really fucking pissed. I did everything to try to keep him calm, and he threw a fucking chair across the room. And I was like, oh, okay, this is a guy who throws a lot of things. And that's when I was like, what have I gotten myself into? Because now I'm legitimately afraid of my partner, and I'm dating him, and I work with him, and he lives with me more or less. How the fuck do I get out of this relationship? And I fucking love him, and I care about him, and I've become his caretaker in so many levels. It's the biggest mindfuck ever. He was like always talking about wanting to get married. And I remember in my head thinking like, there's no fucking way I would ever marry you. But then this other part of me was like, well, I don't know. We get along. But, those are red flags. Someone you just met, you just started dating is like, I want to marry you. It's like, why? Every woman I know who's been in an abusive relationship, the man always wanted to marry them right away. To me, it's a huge red flag because they want to possess you. They want you legally bound to them, I knew I couldn't break up with him and work with him. I knew that he wouldn't leave me alone. I knew it would be catastrophic. And I didn't want to bring my friend who owns the restaurant into any of that garbage. So at first I was like, well, I'll just hold out. You can do 2 more months of this stuff. I had an idea of when I wanted to leave was the fall. I kind of had some plans going in LA to kind of give me that accountability so I would have to leave. I got like a job lined up, and then things would just get worse and worse. And like every time I tried to break up with him, he would use killing himself as, I'm going to kill myself. So at one point in time, I, kind of like hinted about breaking up. And he was like, yeah, go ahead. When those videos go viral, then we'll see what you think. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, those videos of you going down on me? And I was like, we never took videos. And he's like, sure. And then he never said anything else about it, right? you know, he was always lying. He lied about everything. So I was like, whatever. So after that, one night we were at work and he got super duper drunk. And I was actually quite afraid of how drunk he was. And I took him back to my place because at this point in time, he lived in my fucking house. Like, he was there full time. And I knew I was going to leave him. And I suspected there was stuff on his phone. I was afraid that there was stuff that he could actually use against me. So when he was drunk, I broke into his phone and I found 3 videos of me giving him a blowjob. And videos of the ex-girlfriend giving him blowjobs. And then I found in his texts that he'd been flirting with some other girl and trying to start a relationship with another girl. And that was the kicker. I was like, okay, I've been putting up with all this bullshit, but he's fucking cheating on me on top of that? Like, that's it, you know? And I erased all of the videos. And the thing is like, I had no idea that he'd even been taking those videos. Because when I give a blowjob, I'm fucking focused. I'm doing my job, you know? Like, that's all I care about. I didn't know he's all just like recording that shit. I remember looking up once and seeing he had his phone and I was like, why is he checking a text right now? Because it never occurred to me that a man would film me without my permission. So I was so pissed when I found these files. I erased all of them. I texted the girl and I go, hey, this is Jesse's girlfriend. Just wanted you to know he's a lying and an asshole and you know, good luck. Have fun with him, you know. And I was like, that's it. Tomorrow morning, I'm breaking up with this fucking guy. I am done. The next morning, he woke up, doesn't remember anything, is still kind of drunk. And I was thinking, like, how do I break up with him in a way that's safe? And I was going to wait to text him while he was at work because I didn't trust being alone in a house with him. He woke up and he goes, I'm not going into work today. And I was like, oh, fuck. But you have to go to work, you know? And I finally said, I go, well, you can't stay here. And then he was like, why? And then that started the whole conversation. And it became yelling. He took my television and threw it at me. And that scared the shit out of me. So I grabbed my phone and I started, because I don't have cell service at my fucking house because it's New Mexico. You can sometimes get a text, you know, so I texted my friend Eric, who has kind of been the guy I talked to about all this stuff, but he never knew the level of it. And I was like, hey, can you come over? I need help. And then Jesse comes up to me and says, who are you texting? You know, he freaks out because he knows I'm reaching to the outside world. He wrestles me to the ground, pins me down. Like, I had no idea this guy was that strong until this moment because he'd never actually physically, like, restrained me. And, you know, I remember from, like, self-defense class that you're supposed to go for something on their face. But it was a long time since I took this class. So I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to do something in his face that will, like, take him down. So I stuck my hand in his mouth. You're supposed to go for the eyes. That's what gets them off of you. But I stuck my hand in his mouth to try to like yank at his cheek or something. And he bit down so hard on my fingers, I thought I was going to lose my hand. And I screamed at the top of my lungs. And luckily, the owner of the house lives upstairs. And my scream is what made him stop because he knew that she might be up there and hear it. And that's when I was like, oh my God, this guy's going to kill me. So as soon as like he got off of me, I grabbed my phone and I ran out into the front yard. And then the woman upstairs said, are you okay? And I go, no, I'm not. I need your help right now. And then he comes out and he's all like, hey, you know, because they don't want to be that way in front of anyone else. And she got her boyfriend to take him to work to get him out of there. So at that moment, I was like, I thought I was done. I thought I'd broken up with him. And my friend Eric came in and tried to help me. And he came over and he goes, I'm getting all his stuff out of here. You're not to talk to him. I'm going to text him right now and tell him all the conversation goes to me. And this guy was a stand-up dude, man. He showed up for me the way any woman in this situation would love to have someone stand up. I refrained from texting him for a while. All day, I was getting texts. Please, baby, don't do this to me. What? You know, that please, baby, you know, like the whole like roses kind of thing. And then when that wasn't working, then he basically said, I'm going to jump off the bridge. And that's what got me, because it's the trick of all tricks. You know what I mean? I knew I would never live with myself if he killed himself because of me. And he had actually threatened killing himself many times. And I knew it was bullshit because I know that's a narcissistic trick. He would say, sure, go ahead. If you break up with me, they're going to find me hanging from a tree with a note around my neck that says, this is what happens when you love Melanie Hamlett. Which, you know, I knew was bullshit, right? Like, I know that that's a trick, but this is the only person I've ever loved. And he seemed like such a nice boy when I first met him. And now he's a fucking scary man. Maybe I am what caused this. I knew it couldn't be true. But like, you hold that I'm going to commit suicide thing over my head, and now it wouldn't work. I would be like, fine, go kill yourself. They're never going to, but they know it works. After that, I ended up just slowly letting him back in, like under new rules. I was like, all right, because the whole committing suicide thing, I had a good talk with him. I actually think of it as like the Good Will Hunting talk. I sit him down on a bench and I'm like, look, here's what's wrong, and I think maybe this will change. Maybe, and you can't treat me this way. You can't call me a slut anymore. You can't do that, and I basically laid down the law, and he's like, oh yes, no, I won't, whatever. I totally believe that shit. And he actually was on his best behavior for 2 weeks. And then he got crazy again because, he can't help himself. I just kept thinking to myself, just wait, you're leaving October 1st. You can wait 1 more month. Like, what's the worst that could happen? Because also that leaving, like, look what happened when I tried to leave. How do I know he's not going to do more? And then the part of me that loves him and is drawn to him and, like, believes in this old person, and you keep thinking of that person that you fell in love with and their potential, who you believe deep down they could be if they didn't have all this darkness. People always think of abusers as monsters. They're not monsters. They're all around us. They're among us. They're people with darkness. They're human beings. I would never fall in love with a fucking monster. He's a human being, and people don't get that. And so I gave him a second chance and thought I'd just put up with it for this long until I can just get out. And then I went to a friend's wedding. He wasn't supposed to come to the wedding with me, and he kind of manipulated me into going to the wedding with him. And I was like, fine. He showed up at the wedding with a dozen roses, which is like the most selfish thing you can do. Show up at a wedding with a dozen roses for some other girl that's not the fucking bride. You know what I mean? Like, that just says it all right there. Everyone was like, why is he giving you? I'm like, I don't even know. I was so embarrassed, But there was something going on with him that day that between the reception and the ceremony, we went back to my house and we fucked. But it was like a really weird kind of fucking, like, he had a look in his eye that was really weird. It wasn't normal sex. It was like he was possessed by something. So then we went to the reception after that, and he got really wasted. And I was like, oh, fuck. Now I got to deal with wasted Jesse again. I had to leave the wedding early, the reception early, because I had to take care of him. And he was house sitting for someone that week, because I was like, oh, good, I'll get him out of my house a little bit. I took him to his place that he was staying. So I let him, like, pass out on the couch in front of the TV. I put in, like, Young Guns 2 or some shit, And he, like, passed out watching that. And I remember thinking to myself, what's the best choice right now? Should I go back to my house? Because I don't really feel safe with him because he's super fucking drunk, and if he wakes up, I could be in trouble. If I leave and he wakes up and I'm not here, he's gonna drive to my house, wasted, and be really fucking pissed. So I went into the guest bedroom where we were gonna both sleep, but he passed out on the couch. I went in the guest bedroom, closed the door. In the middle of the night, he comes in pissed. Why am I out there sleeping? Why'd you let me sleep? Whatever. And then I play asleep. I play dead. And I just hoped if he thought I was asleep, he'd leave me alone, He crawled into bed. He started trying to have sex with me, and I played dead. First, fingers, and then grabbing my boobs, and then just full on getting on top of me. And finally, I was like, okay, this playing dead thing's not really working out. So I was like, I pretend like I was waking up, oh, what, don't, and it's like he wasn't there, because all of a sudden his voice was like almost demonic, and I was like, started saying no, and he was like, yes. And it scared me because I could hear in his voice he wasn't going to take no for an answer. But I fought him off for a while, and it worked. He finally gave up and, rolled back over. And I thought, oh God, here, maybe I got out of this. And then sure enough, he started, grabbing me and stuff again. And this time there was no resisting him. He got on top of me, and this man's strong, like he's not huge, but I can't fight him. Like I tried to push him off, and I even said, you're raping me right now. And then none of that got through to him, and he just kept doing it. he was trying to butt fuck me, and he had already tried to do that in the past, and I kind of had let him once, and it hurt so bad, and I shit my pants the whole next day that I was like, we're never doing that again, and we hadn't. And now he's trying to butt rape me, and I was like, no. So when I realized there's nothing I can do to stop this man, I redirected it into my vagina at least, because if I'm gonna fucking get raped, I don't want to bleed coming out of this thing. And finally, I gave up. I couldn't fight anymore. There's nothing I can do, and he just raped me. And he didn't just do it. He hooked his finger in the side of my cheek like a fish hook and pulled my hair like I'm a fucking horse and did his thing. And the whole time while it was happening, you kind of disassociate and you're not there emotionally. And I was thinking, wow, okay, I'm getting raped right now. Okay, yeah. But it didn't really hit me in what was happening till the next day. When I woke up, I got a text from my friend who had seen him at the wedding, and it's just very intuitive, and she sent me a text and said, hey, you want to come over for coffee? And I was like, sure. And when I got over there, she was like, I'm really worried about you. Did something happen last night? And I was like, and I laughed when I said it. I was like, well, he raped me. Because again, you can't really process something that horrific until much, much later. And then she was like, you got to get out of there, and had all these plans of how she's going to move me out. And I said, that's not going to happen. No, if I'm going to get out of this, I got to do it my way. Because I intuitively knew that the police wouldn't be able to protect me. But I went in there and tried to report it, just to get it on file. And they bullied me. They bullied me into telling me they were going to press charges, and said they're going to go after him. And I was like, no, you can't do that. I'm still living with this guy. If he knows that I came to you, he could hurt me. And they were just such assholes that I finally said, so if I stick to this story, you're going to do whatever you want with it, regardless of what I want you to do. And they're like, yeah, it's out of your hands. And I said, okay, officer, thank you very much. I made it all up. He never raped me. Goodbye. And like a really shitty, fuck you. This happened, but I'm going to recant because you're being a dick. So I left there just furious. And the thing is, you can't get a restraining order against someone you're dating. I mean, you can, but legally they have to tell them that you have a restraining order against them. And the last thing I want to do is provoke this guy. He's the kind of guy where, I just believe that he believed in this whole Romeo-Juliet idea of love, because at one point in time we were driving and he almost drove off a cliff with both of us in the car. Do you know what I mean? So in my mind, a restraining order wouldn't do any good, because if he just comes to my house once, he could kill me. And he'd been to jail so many times before. He told me he'd been in and out of jail, for this or that. He never told me it was for domestic violence, of course. None of it ever had anything to do with women, of course, because he's not going to tell me those stories. It was always illegally sleeping on a train or some whatever, but that's not what he was in jail for. Unless they literally lock this man up, I'm not safe in this town, because I live in a house with no fucking cell phone service. If he comes to my house, I can't even call the police. I can't text them, and their response time would be 30 minutes to get out to my house. Those next few days, though, after the rape, they tell you that you feel dead inside or whatever. That's what everyone tells you. You just feel dead inside. Well, it's true. I've never felt just so, it's like someone just ripped out every bit of passion that I had for anything. I just wanted to sleep. I just didn't fucking care. The funny thing is the body is, at this point in time, I'd also gotten sick several times just from not using my voice. I developed this crazy throat disease where I had to stay in the emergency room one night because my throat was so infected from being so drained from this relationship and silencing myself. I mean, I had no energy anymore. Everyone would say, you're not even yourself. You're not smile anymore. And I'm like, I know. I literally feel like the blood has been sucked out of me. You're just in pure survival mode at that point, And I also went to domestic violence shelter after he raped me. And I was like, so I got this situation. I'm like leaving town soon. I'm going to get away from this guy. But like, what do I need to be careful about? And they were like, well, look for tracking devices. Look for this, this, and this, and this. I'm like, oh, he's poor. He doesn't have any money. He could never afford a tracking device. And they're like, well, just be careful because the sooner you get to the day you're leaving, the more likely you are to get killed by them. And I was like, oh, thanks. Good to know. So at this point in time, like, I just need to buy my time. So my friend Annie was going to be flying in soon to help me pack up and move. And I had kind of created this whole lie about how I'm going to California, but you can join me after I'm out there. Like, just anything to get this guy to placate him and not think that we're never going to see each other again. But I think he intuitively knew, you know? And as soon as Annie got there, he started behaving because she's staying with us. She slept outside of my door on the floor like a fucking pit bull, just so he knew she was there. She could hear everything. So he would quietly try to have sex with me. I would break out in hives every time I was around this man. That's how allergic my body was to him, because my body was so traumatized. And my body's like, why are you with this person? I'm like, shut up, body, just shut up. I'm leaving. You just need to hold out one more week, you know? It's crazy. So I convinced him to not fuck me for like maybe a few days after he raped me because, you know, I was like, I'm really sore. I'm like hurt, like he raped me, blah, blah, blah. And then finally he started pressuring me. You know, on some level, he raped me many times because he convinced me out of fear and intimidation to have sex with him. And I cried during the whole thing and he could care less. So it really wasn't consensual sex. And anytime you're fucking a partner you're afraid of, it's not consensual because the consequence is getting hurt. So sorry, that's rape. You know, so he violently raped me once and like lovingly raped me a few times after that. What blew my mind about this whole relationship is that, you know, I've been known for being like this, like adventurous, wild girl. You know, I'm not afraid. And people would always say, especially when I was living in my car, aren't you afraid of getting like raped and murdered and shit? You know, and I'd always say, no, I mean, life isn't a Law and Order episode. You know, like it's not as dangerous out there as you think it is. And I'm not going to fucking stay in my house because you tell me that people are trying to rape me all the time. Who? The boogeyman? Alleged rapists everywhere? Because I'm pretty sure most people who get raped are raped by people they know. As it turns out, you know, the only thing I was actually afraid of, like truly afraid of, was intimacy and relationships and letting someone into my heart and my home. And the irony behind all of this is the one time I let someone in my heart and my home, they not only raped me, they tried to kill me. So that is the reality of being a woman in America, is that it's actually way safer out in the woods, in your car, among strangers, than it is in our own fucking home. Once he got tired of playing this great guy in front of Annie, he just couldn't pull it off anymore. He started showing his frustrations and whatever. And by the time, like, the last day in town, he basically got so angry because I wouldn't fuck him in the shower that he almost ran me and Annie off the road later on when we were trying to move some stuff. It was just fucking chaos. Everything about that last week, it would take me hours to even explain that. But we went to the police. I was like, fuck this guy. I told them everything. I just wanted on record because I know he's going to go after another woman, and I wanted there to be proof somewhere that he's done it before. But I saw one of our friends who was kind of a mutual friend who'd always, you know, he's my friend, but like had been nice to Jesse this whole time. I saw him at the store, and even on the last day in town, I was still worried if Jesse was going to be okay. This man is so lost. He's so broken. And at this point, I'd done so much to take care of this person. And like, I had this maternal thing for this man that I loved, that I was at the store, I saw him and I was like, hey, will you check in on him? Like, and Annie in the parking lot, she goes, he fucking raped you and you're still looking out for him. And I'm like, I know, that's fucked up, right? You know, like, and the day before I was leaving, because he didn't know exactly when I was leaving. He just, you know, anyway, I had to be very vague about it because I didn't want to die. I was in my bedroom. He was laying on my bed and, you know, he knew the end was near and he just was bawling. And I remember looking at him and thinking like, he thinks he loves me so much and needs me so much. And really, this is about like his mommy issues and his abandonment issues and just women issues that have nothing to do with me. But I'm abandoning him in his mind. I'm leaving him. And I believe firmly that people who act this way justify everything that they do. And they believe the lies they tell themselves. They're delusional. And I think that they believe everything they're doing is for a higher purpose. Because otherwise, they'd be fucking like Darth Vader or some shit. And even he has like a heart. One of the things that made it hard for me to get out is that my ego was really invested in this relationship. Nothing makes you feel more important than thinking you're the only person that can calm someone down. You're the only person that can comfort them. That's all ego. This guy's fine. I'm sure he dated someone right after me, and he's probably torturing them too. But that's the trick that your ego plays on you, is that they're not going to be okay if you leave them. And they tell you that, by threatening suicide and all this other stuff. And you know how they say relationships are a lot of work, and they are. But you know what else is a lot of work? Is the relationship with yourself. And this whole time I had been putting all my emphasis on this relationship with him and completely denying the relationship with myself, and it made me very sick. It's a codependent fucking mess. And I thought to myself, God, I don't want to leave him, and I do love him despite everything he's done to me. But I love myself more. I have to. I have to. And I had to keep telling myself that as I left. Annie and I got the fuck out of there, Thelma and Louise style, minus going off of a cliff. A woman saved me, which I liked. I liked that a woman came down to save me, because that's kind of nice and poetic. I go to Planned Parenthood because I'd found out when I'd broke into his phone, I'd found all these emails. He'd been soliciting sex on Craigslist. He'd been placing ads. He'd been answering ads. And I didn't know if this guy had fucked any of these women. And I also wanted to make sure like my vagina's not broken from being raped. You know what I mean? I just check it out down there. And while I'm in the stirrups, I kind of tell her, oh, well, I just got out of an abusive relationship. And she starts kind of asking me questions, and basically, she's like, well, did you guys live together? And I'm like, well, I mean, he kind of lived with me. He just didn't really pay rent, and then I'm like, actually, in that moment, I'm like, I guess he was pretty much homeless. Yeah. I dated a fucking homeless man, and because you really can't see how bad things are when you're in the middle of them, because your survival mind can't. It needs to do whatever it needs to do. But once you're out of it, the fog has lifted. Not only did I realize I dated a homeless man, but this man, I had caught him eating dog bones at one point in time. And he'd justify, well, when I rode the rails, I used to eat out of trash bins, and dog food's good. And I'm like, that's not normal. I don't want to kiss your mouth if you're eating fucking dog food, okay? None of that anymore. And also to ask him at one point in time, why do I never see you brushing your teeth? And he's like, oh, I brush my teeth. And I'm like, when? I've never seen you do it. And out back. I'm like, what? He would brush his teeth with his finger and dirt. And he's like, you don't really need soap. The dirt's an abrasive. And actually, I do believe there's some truth to that. But fuck, dude. Come on. You're not touching any of my pink parts with your mouth if you're fucking using dirt to clean it, okay? It's not easy to get away from men like this, right? I thought maybe he wouldn't actually come to California. Well, he did. A week later, he did. And he basically was harassing me with text, or calling, leaving a message about what a whore I am. And I was trying to ignore him. He sent me a text one day saying, because he knows how to get me, I was shot last night, thank you very much. Glad to know you have that kind of pull. And so I'm right back, what? And that part of me is genuinely like, oh my God, yes, and by who? Are you in the hospital? Why not? And he wrote back, no, I've been shot before. Took care of it on my own with needle and dental floss. And I don't doubt that he's actually done that before, but I still doubt that he was actually shot. And I wrote back, okay, I want to pick, because at this point I'm like, he's a compulsive liar. I do know that. And that maternal part of me does not believe him anymore. And then he wrote back, I don't need no hospitals. You're the one that pushed me to be here anyway. Of course. I'm like, all right. So I just wrote back, okay, first of all, I don't know anybody who would shoot you. I don't even know anyone with a gun. Nobody loves me that much to murder anyone over me. And where did it happen? You know, I play all like Nancy Drew anytime he starts telling me, I want to catch him in a lie. And he said, it happened downtown near the inn. All the dude said was, this is from Melanie. So even though I knew this was bullshit, I got upset and I'm engaging with this man. And that's actually what worried me, is that why am I talking to him? So I was like, okay. So I blocked him after that. No more texts from this guy because I don't even have the self-restraint not to engage with him. You know, like you can't engage at all. So because of that, he started a Twitter account under the name Jesse James because he always wanted to be a cowboy. And, he would tweet at me. He only had 4 followers, so I wasn't really too worried about anyone reading his tweets, but still. Sounds like you enjoy sleeping around at Melanie Hamlett. Then he sent another one. Wow, cheap date. All it took was a new bra at Melanie Hamlett. I don't even know what he's talking about, you know? Like, I don't know what he's talking about. You know, first his profile picture was that little default egg, but then he sent me another tweet later on, and he had changed his profile picture to a picture of my vagina. I know it was my vagina because I could see my underwear, like he had pulled my underwear aside to take a picture of it. Now, society would be like, well, that's what you get for sending the pictures of your vagina. I didn't send that fucking picture. He took it while I was asleep. So I contacted Twitter and got his account shut down. Anyway, I didn't hear from him for a while. I blocked his number. And then one day, like months later, I get this text from a number that I don't know. And it says, hey, you don't know me, but my name is Jake. You know my friend Jesse. I just found out he killed himself. He gave me a letter before he left my house. Just wanted to try to get that letter to you. Is there somewhere I can send it? Now, at first, again, I was like, he did kill himself, you know? And then I'm like, wait a second. This is all lowercase and no punctuation. This is fucking Jesse, you know? And I'm like, okay. Even though part of me was like, well, what if it's not? And I'm like, no, I'm sure it is. And so I write back like, what? What happened? When did it happen? What? You know? And he says he left 5 days ago. He hung himself. But while he was here, he told me that he fucked up and he shouldn't have given up. And I write back, I'm like, but when did he do it? Who found him? A couple of friends. They were out in the forest cutting wood and came across him. The level of detail that he goes into in these crazy lies just fascinates me. And then I keep pressing him for details. I'm like, well, when's the funeral? Because I want to catch him in a lie again, you know? And he goes, oh, they buried him under the tree. They found him. Nobody would ever do that. And of course, then I'm thinking like, did they find a note around his neck that said, this is what happens when Melanie Hamlett loves you? You know, but I don't want to engage this man, right? He wrote, I don't understand why he did it. If he loved you so much, why? I hate to bring up hard times, but why did you two split? And I know he's trying to trap me here, right? So I go, oh, you know, he didn't like it when we talked about our relationship. So I don't think I should talk about that. I know what's going to placate Jake. You know what I mean? So after this back and forth, the very last text he sends me, he says, okay, well, I read the letter. There's nothing in there saying that you did this to me. Oops. First person. Oops. You messed up, Jake. If anything, he reads of sorrow and unhappiness of losing you. He was terrible at grammar, you know. And then he wrote, okay, well, have a good day otherwise. And that just shows you, like, no human being would ever send a text, hey, your boyfriend that you loved, he killed himself. He hung himself from a tree. They buried him under the tree. But, okay, you don't want the letter? No. Okay, well, have a good day. The thing about this whole story is that, well, I'm free now, you know, like, he's dead. He can't come get me. And I had actually contacted one of his exes and I said, hey, I just broke up with Jesse and should I be worried? Like, is he going to try to come find me? Is he going to, like, kill me maybe? And she wrote back saying, that guy's crazy. Last time I saw him, he left me for dead on railroad tracks with strangulation marks around my neck and broken ribs when the police carried him away. He will never leave you alone. He still sends me pictures of his dick going into my ass 6 years later. But he can't do that to me now because he's quote unquote dead. So on some level, I am free. One of the things that drives me crazy about the way people talk about these kinds of relationships is, why didn't she just leave? Why did she stay? I used to be these people. I used to be like, what's wrong with that stupid bitch, man? Duh, get out of there, Well, it's a lot more complicated. There's emotions involved. There's love involved. Luckily, I didn't have children and I wasn't financially dependent on this fucking guy. There's that maternal instinct that worries about them and feels like you have to take care of them. And then there's that part of you that's been beaten down emotionally by someone who calls you a whore all the time and makes you feel worthless, that even when it is time to go, you don't even believe in yourself anymore. You don't even like yourself enough to get out of there. But people, they call women stupid and they call these men monsters. Well, that doesn't serve anybody. They're not monsters. They are our brothers, our husbands, our boyfriends, our bosses at work, our coworkers, our teachers, cops. They are men all over our community, and they're not monsters. They're sick people who belong in jail, but they're human beings that people fall in love with. So not only is it demeaning to them and dehumanizing to them, but it's also super patronizing to do that because it makes the women who date them feel like morons for having dated them. I didn't fall in love with a monster. I fell in love with a man who was super sweet to me and showed me affection and made me laugh. And yes, he's broken and fucked up, but he hid it really well. So I'm not a stupid bitch for getting involved with him. I'm not an idiot. I'm not a crazy woman. We're all broken on some level, but some of us are way more fucked up. After I got back out of this relationship, I waited a year before I dated anyone because I didn't want to bring this trauma into a new relationship. I have a very high standard of dating now. I never would have been this. I have an open heart, but it's guarded now. I don't just let anybody in because you can't. That's dangerous. So I don't even go on dates with guys that show red flags anymore. I can tell by the way they text me if they value me or if they're a narcissist. And I don't accept any bullshit anymore. And all the guys I've gone on dates with and gotten involved with have been very, very nice guys. Really good men. And I've never been in that situation before where I actually trust myself and I trust my intuition and I listen to it. And I dated this one guy for like 6 weeks and then he ended up basically ghosting me. And I know why. He wasn't ready. He'd actually kind of even said that in the beginning. I didn't listen, but he was a good man. And I remember just being so hurt, because I'm like, fuck, I had opened my heart up again. It wasn't even about him. It was about trusting someone again and feeling betrayed and just feeling so vulnerable all over again. And I was bawling for days. I was like, this is the worst thing I've ever been through. And whenever I'm just crying, and I had this intuitive thought that was like, yeah, but he didn't rape you or try to kill you. And I thought, you're right. He just ghosted me. That's no big deal. Other than murdering someone, raping someone is the worst thing you can do to someone because it kills their spirit, right? And I got over that. I'm doing great now. I'm doing wonderful now. I can get over ghosting. I can get over anything. I'm unfucking breakable at this point. It's a sad way to get to that point, but nothing can break me now. And that's a pretty fucking awesome place to be.
All right, well, we're back. Wow. That was a little optimistic of me. What do you... So, Aisha, I don't know about you, but I just listening to that ending made me cringe. It sounds really cocky and really naive, and knowing what I was going to face later on, I had no idea. And I also feel compassion for that younger version of myself who's like, look, I'm cured. I'll never, ever date a narcissist again because I can tell in the first text. Was that your experience? Is this very normal for women or survivors to do?
So here's the thing. That was recorded in 2016, and that was the year that I left my ex. And so
wow.
that's wild, right? So
Yeah.
I had those similar feelings. I thought I left, all the work is done, right?
Yeah.
I'm healed. I got out of that situation and I'm all better now, right? Like that's totally behind me. I can like start my life again. So the sentiment, exactly. I felt the same way you did.
Yeah. I mean, I think this story happened in like 2014. And then I told the story in Risk on 2 years later. So I'm thinking, and you know, it's so funny. My sister, my older sister, who is always like 10 steps ahead of me and wiser and knows me very well. She said, well, I know like you sound a little too good. She had said that a lot, right? And she was like, I just want you to keep in mind that I think a lot of this trauma and is really going to come up the next time you try to get into a relationship. And boy, was she right. And the stuff that I have put my husband through, which is crazy. I'm married now. I can't even believe that. But like the way that I project this relationship onto him, which I can get into later on after we kind of go through this, if I wasn't aware and constantly working on this stuff, I would have absolutely sabotaged this relationship with a really healthy man because I get triggered a lot by what my ex did and throwing that in his face and punishing him for what that guy did.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is do you find that to be pretty common among survivors? Especially if they're really not facing all of this stuff, is just being like, it's the hypervigilance of like, never again, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it's like you're trying to undo what happened in that relationship, in this relationship. Like, I didn't see those signs, but now I see every sign and I'm gonna do something this time. Like I'm gonna leave. And it's mind racking and it's so emotionally reactive, but it's what a survivor does. So it's understandable, but it's very uncomfortable.
I never thought of it as undoing. That's a really great way to look at it, because I kind of thought of it as like projecting and reliving, but that's what it is. It's like, I mean, and I know it's like, that'll never happen to me kind of thing, but but undoing, because still now I know that I'm in a good place, because when I went back and listened to this story, I wasn't being really mean and judgmental. I really disagree, or not disagree, but I'm like, oh, honestly, the biggest eye-opening thing in the last several years, especially since TikTok, because as you know, TikTok is it really is it's not a dancing app for most of us, right? And it is where I start when I got temporarily in the narcissist niche of TikTok, and I started hearing all these stories from other women. I was like, oh my God, they all do the same thing. The details are a little different.
Yep.
I had no idea how much I'd been abused until I started hearing other women's stories. So even the way, when I'm telling the story, I'm laughing all the time, which is a classic me, because of course, like comedians going to deflect with humor. But I really hadn't processed what had happened to me. And it also kept minimizing a lot of it. I'm like, whatever, like he's like Romeo and Juliet version of love. Oh my God, when I heard that line, I was like, oh my God, no. This man has almost murdered so many women, Like, I do not believe monstering people is, like, I still stand on what I said in deep down, but like, I also really minimized how much harm was financially, sexually, emotionally, and I didn't know the word hobosexual until TikTok. And that's exactly what this dude was a hobosexual, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about a lot in this, is like when I listened to when I was listening to the story, I took some notes. I was like, oh my God, I didn't even know when I told this story, this is what narcissists do. Some of it I did catch, like the quick marriage proposal. I want to marry you. I don't think I mentioned in this one about him trying to get me pregnant. No, didn't. Okay. So yeah, that was another thing, is he'd said, at one point, basically I was celibate for most of my adult life. I didn't fuck with men for a reason, because I just kind of knew that like I didn't like who I became when I was with them. So I was out there decentering men, living my 4B lifestyle of like, and I had an amazing life. And yet first relationship I got into, boom, all this stuff that was kind of just waiting to find that person to work out on, to recreate childhood trauma like act 2 and 3 of what act 1, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so I was feeling good before I met him. And then it was like I was forced to face all of this childhood trauma through that relationship with him, which I didn't even connect those dots till years after I told this story.
Right.
You know, I didn't even know that how much of my childhood was wrapped into this story while telling this story 9 years ago. Right.
Yeah.
So, but, you know, I knew that the marriage, wanting to get married quickly is a huge red flag. But he had also said, because I got an IUD, because I just kind of was like, well, I never took birth control. I just used condoms because I never had a reason to be on birth control. And I wasn't having sex enough to be on birth control. I like literally never dated. This is the first man I really, truly dated. And so I got an IUD so I wouldn't have to think about it. And then at one point he let it slip. He was like, I couldn't believe he said this out loud. And it was so informative. And I tell this now all the time to try to warn women. He said, he's like, wish you hadn't got that IUD. Now you can just leave. And I didn't see that as the red flag that it was, but it disturbed me. But of course, I just blew it off with a joke. And and this is so true. I was like, you can't trap me with a baby because, I don't child free like you. I don't want a baby. I've never wanted to be a baby. I was like, I just abort that shit. If you really want to trap me, you get a dog. And I was just kidding. He brought a puppy home like a few days later.
What?
He tried to dog trap me since he couldn't baby trap me.
Oh my God.
So I had to rehome this dog. Because I want a dog. I've always wanted a dog. But even then I knew I'm in no position to own a dog. I'm like probably going to move to LA and then who knows, like I'm not ready for that commitment. To me, like having a dog was like having a child. And and it kind of, now that I have a dog, I'm like, it really does limit your life in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't ready for a dog. So luckily I found a coworker of mine, one of the guys he lived in the van down by the river with, took the dog. But yeah, I didn't know that dog trapping was a thing. And until TikTok and finding out how, my whole life I thought, it's women who baby trap men. And it doesn't mean, that's not to say that doesn't happen, but I had no idea how much of what men accuse us of is an admission. It is what they are actually doing. They are the gold diggers because they're homosexuals. They're the baby trappers. I mean, again, sometimes women do that, but men are baby trapping us because he wanted me. He had already had a daughter with a woman in California and used being a dad to, that's what made me fall for him, which I also didn't mention in this story, was that he talked about his daughter all the time. I guarantee you he wasn't sending her child support because I also didn't know at the time that men who don't have a driver's license and all that stuff, it's because they're evading the law.
Wow.
I learned that on TikTok as well. I didn't know that. I was like, I kept trying to help him get a driver's license, because I became his mom. And I was like, I don't understand. Why do we have everyone has a driver's license? Every time I tried to help him get one, it never worked out. And I didn't realize it's because this man is on the run.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so fascinating that our experience, and that's what I really want to touch on, like how different you can be, but how similar the shared experience is.
Yeah.
And the baby trapping, I will always joke like, you wish I was your baby mama, right? Like these men would be like, oh, well, we should have a baby. We should have a baby. Just like we should go to dinner, like common things.
Yeah.
And it would blow my mind. And I would be like, well, everyone wants me to be their baby mama. Like I'm everyone's type. And I laughed it off too and didn't take like, okay, you're not trying to make a deeper connection with me. You're trying to trap me. Yeah. But I didn't take it seriously enough. I didn't.
Yeah.
It blows my mind to this day.
Yeah. And I think it is because, and this is why I think storytelling is so powerful because it is literally women telling their stories on TikTok or on other social media platforms, but TikTok, YouTube and stuff, where it's all the same. It was the baby. It's the baby because from then on, they can, use custody. They can you have to be linked to them somehow unless you can prove that they're to the courts, and they'll abuse you through the courts and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Oh, I was like, what is that noise? That's my dog. So that is so common. Trap you with marriage. And that's also what I also learned is when they take the mask off. And I didn't even understand this whole mask thing, right? I didn't realize that this dude, I kept thinking, if only he would go back to being this like nurturing, kind, affectionate man that he was in the beginning. And, and he knew my buttons, man. He knew that saying, you're going to find me hanging from a tree with a note around my neck saying, this is what happens when Melanie Hamlett loves you. When you say that to a woman who's never been in love, right? Who clearly has commitment issues and stuff like that, and then threatens suicide. And that if you kill yourself, it's because, well, he was a different man when I met him, so maybe it is me. And even though I knew it was bullshit,
right,
it seemed like the evidence was proving different,
Right. And you don't want to be responsible for that. And even Cardi B and Offset are going through that right now in real time, where he's threatening to kill himself, and sending her messages. And I've had men do that to me as well. And it's like, you panic. I don't want this to happen. I don't want to be the reason someone hurts themselves. And it is so common. You think it's only happening to you. And then it does. It activates this, I'm responsible for the things people do that we carry from childhood. And you get terrified. And they know it. And this is why they do it. It's so common.
Especially the other thing that I've also, I didn't understand how patriarchy played into all this too. I didn't understand, I knew that I was codependent, but I didn't realize that society had groomed me for this on some level. It's like when I hear women on all these women divorcing men, it's because they're like, I don't want to fuck a child, and my husband has turned into a child, and I don't want to be his mom. That's not what I signed up for. And I was like, oh wow, that's what my ex did too, even though he was also abusive and these other things. I didn't realize that collectively women have been taught that we are responsible for men, right? And we're responsible for everybody, really, because if it's not a man, then it's just being someone's caregiver, right? And so I didn't realize that even if they aren't conscious of it, they know that we do this, right? Yeah. And so even if they may not have the thought like, I'm going to weaponize this maternal instinct that society has taught her to have, right? They're not saying that, but they will be like, I don't know how to do that. And just start acting like a baby. And they know that in the story I'm talking about, I'm bringing a fucking diaper bag to the ER because I know this little fucking baby man who's terrifying is going to bitch and moan and all this stuff if he doesn't have snacks and water. I brought a Kindle to keep him entertained. And they don't have to be abusive to do that. So many men do that. They weaponize their moods. They weaponize their neediness and this baby thing. And because they know I honestly think that's one of the biggest ways that men like this control us is with this maternal crap, because they know that we don't want to hurt someone that is in need, who's vulnerable, who's dependent on us. Right. And so they play that victim and baby crap all the time so that we will forever hate ourselves. If anything, we feel responsible for them. And I had no idea how much suicide threats were a part of abuse. And so that's when I started in the last couple of years, I started warning women, if they start threatening a suicide, every time you mention that, you are most likely in an abusive relationship, you don't even know it yet. Right.
And the thing, being a therapist, for me, I felt like I should know these signs.
Yeah,
but he would weaponize the fact that I'm a therapist. And, it's like, you see me hurting. You don't care about me, but you care about your clients. You see that I am feeling like hurting myself. But if a client called you, you would go running and you're going to leave me. This is what he would do to me, girl.
Oh my God, that's next level.
Isn't that
manipulation?
Next level? Yeah. You're going to leave me in this state, but you would care for a stranger. Do you know what I mean? And how guilty I would feel and how ashamed I would feel, because I would be called to action if one of my clients were struggling like this, but I'm going to ignore my man.
Are you legally bound to do that for clients too?
I'm legally bound to do that for anyone in the state I'm licensed in. And so here in Nevada, I have to carry my license on my person. And if I see anything, I have to respond. I'm a mandated reporter everywhere I go. That is the responsibility that I carry. And it's something that I'm very proud of. Like, I do see myself as someone who protects children and who will step in if someone is being harmed. But he knew that, right?
Yeah.
That's a core part of who I am. And I also confused pity and compassion.
Yep.
I confused those. And I didn't realize these nuances of my personality and the way I saw myself and my trauma, and how he was able to activate all those things at the same time. And now I'm overwhelmed with emotion and can't think, just like you were saying in the story.
Yeah, that's one of the things like that I don't know about you, but this guy was not smart. And I don't mean because he didn't have an education or any of that. Like, I feel like that's what it sounded like in the story. I could not have a conversation about, he had no emotional intelligence. Like, and yet because I couldn't have conversations with him. He wasn't like intellectually or emotionally stimulating in any conversations. And like, I was already teaching him about feminism, which in the end, I'm like, oh, clearly he didn't care. But I always thought I was ahead of him, 10 steps ahead. Boy, and this was very humbling to realize that even though this guy is like not that smart, he's a predator. And his livelihood depends on exploiting labor out of women, financially abusing women. Like this is like life and death for him. You know, he's like a bed bug, you know, like they're not, you know, to him, it's like, yeah, I don't know, when you go to sleep, I'm going to bite you. That's what I do, you know? And so he is his life and death. So even if he's like, it doesn't mean he's like thoughtful and intuitive. He was just like, he could read me just the way like something, and because of things that happened to me when I was a child for the longest time, which I really didn't deal truly with until after telling this story, was that, you know, like creepy old men are constantly target me and I could never figure out why. And it's because they are assessing constantly who has boundaries and who doesn't, right? Who is going to be a bitch and who's going to be like, who's apologizing and who is dismissing, who. They have like a self-abandonment radar, you know? And when I was listening to the story, I thought about like the scene when I was talking about the tire. What I left out of that story was something I later realized was very key, is that I was signaling regularly low self-esteem, low self-worth, and like self-abandonment when it came to relationships. Like I could be a rock climber and all this thing and feel so confident. When it came to romantic relationships with men, with all of this stuff I hadn't dealt with yet, when he came over to fix a tire, he was like, you know, like when I said, "You want to come inside?" Yeah. And then I was like, just promise me you won't hit on my roommate because she was really beautiful. And he was like, no, I came here to see you. With these little sentences that I would drop showing I'm really insecure. He picked up on all of that.
Exactly.
You know, he picked up on all that. So he knew by the time he kind of had me what to play at what time, you know, which string to pull. You know, anytime, like, and every single time he learned through practice, and that anytime I was mad at him, all he had to do was fake an illness, and he would have control over me again. That I didn't know at the time when I told that story. That whole back injury, I am convinced now he made all that shit up. Exactly. That was a fucking lie. Men, they make up being sick. They make up. When I told that story on TikTok, there were hundreds of comments of women being like, my boyfriend faked stage 4 cancer.
Cancer, girl. Yes.
You know,
cancer. Yep. I'm going to the doctor and they think I might have cancer. And the big C, you're like, oh my God, I can't leave him now. Like what's going to happen?
Yep.
And they do scan you like a document. And
yes.
We've been talking about adolescence and how Jamie was 13 and preyed on that young girl because he knew she was vulnerable. So these men have been practicing that type of scanning, searching for vulnerability since they were in elementary school. Elementary school. So they got at least a 10, 15 year head start on you scanning women before we even enter the picture. So of course, they are experts at these little micro interactions between people that they push And if you backed 1 inch, they won.
Yep.
They won. And that's what they're trying to do. So this isn't about someone being a rocket scientist, because this isn't about intelligence, right? It's really not.
Yeah.
It's instinct.
Yep.
It's predatory
It's
instinct. It's instinct.
Exactly.
And it happens beyond our conscious mind. It really does. And that's what that shame that so many women carry, that I carried, I had to let that go, because the things that these men do to both of us, and women in general, and women do this too, right? Predatory behavior doesn't have a gender.
Yeah.
They pass our conscious mind and they tap into this subconscious vulnerability that we're not even aware exists. We're not aware. And these relationships reveal the way our trauma lives in us. That's what they do. That's what they're for. So it's an opportunity of healing by fire, but it's still an opportunity to heal.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you can die trying to heal it, right?
Yes.
So that's why after I got out of this relationship, I kind of was like, I didn't take dating that seriously, but I also didn't do it because I was just too busy. And anytime I'd kind of liked a guy, but I also moved all the time. I lived in my truck. I was in Jackson Hole, then I'm in New Mexico. So I was very nomadic, and I also think I did that for a reason. Well, several reasons. Some of it for adventure. Some of it is rooted in childhood stuff. But also, it was kind of a self-protective mechanism. I had a bed in the back of my truck. I made it a single bed. Like, I set my life up because I just knew from any little experiences I'd had with men, and that I either lose myself or I just didn't like myself when I was involved with them long term, or really at all. Because I also pushed away any of the guys who were kind of nice because it scared me. I'm like, don't you understand how fucked up I am? What are you doing? Like, what's wrong with you? I didn't realize how much, I kept going after men. And I didn't realize also how much it's tied to you really trying to heal something, right? If this guy who's doing this, if he stops doing it, then it makes sense to me why, right? I kept trying to heal some dad stuff for sure. Yeah. But it's not judging myself for having gone through that was, I haven't forgiven him. I just don't care. I don't think about him. I don't have any hatred towards him, but I haven't forgiven him. But forgiving myself has been the hardest. Not being judgmental, not being, I'm I was so proud of being a feminist. And yet I dated someone who hates women to the core, who hates women more than any man I have ever met in my fucking life.
Yeah.
But he also hates himself.
Right.
So, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. And that was my first relationship, but I didn't even realize, this was left out of the story too, is that he also, he posted on Facebook, in a relationship with Melanie Hamlett, right out of the gate, right? As soon as we became official. And I was like, oh, I wasn't really ready for that. That's weird that he didn't discuss that with me. Mm-hmm. So then I was like, I didn't want to untag myself because I didn't want to hurt his feelings. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess everyone back home knows I'm in a relationship. I really wasn't planning on going public with it because I always intuitively knew this isn't a healthy thing. Like I said, when I was sitting in that chair that day and got that text, and I just already was I don't like who I'm becoming in this. This feels so unhealthy. I don't like anything about this, but there's something about this guy. And just literally being I knew it was a battle of now I understand it's trauma stuff too. But to me, it was a battle of my ego versus my intuition, and my ego won out. She was like, fuck it. You've never had a boyfriend. What's the worst that could happen?
The minimization of the risk. There was also, I took notes because there was so many similarities that I wanted to tease out the larger themes. Yeah. And one of them is social media. And that social media has become this large part of our life. It's a third part, right, of our life and where we spend time. But the way that they weaponize social media, it is bullying. And it is saying, oh, you're going to have to tell all these people now we're not in a relationship. Is that what you want to do?
Yeah.
Is that really what you want to do? Do you really want to go back and forth? Because we can do that, but you're the one that's going to look crazy, right? You're the one that's going to look unstable. And the way he like targeted you, harassed you online, on Twitter, like, and did it all on purpose to humiliate you. And this stage of social media, the world can see it. The world has access because people screenshot and now they're sending it to everyone. And it is bullying.
Yeah.
Really. And even, oh, we're in a relationship. That's bullying. He didn't ask you. He
didn't
bullied
ask.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, at the time I didn't realize, I mean, because that's the thing is that was my thing. That's like when I was telling stories on risk. That's why it's so funny because I hadn't told a story on risk since I've gotten married. Like I'm so in a different place than I was in all my stories on risk. So my stories on risk, my stories on stage, everything was about me being like this wild and crazy, you know, traveler, raft guy, strong, blah, hate fucks and all this stuff, you know. That was like my shtick, or that's what I was known for. And part of that was like total, you know, defense mechanism kind of thing. But, you know, I just knew it would be a big deal for me to announce I was in a relationship because no one had ever seen me in a relationship in all of my online presence ever, right? Never. Right. So this is going to be the first one. And I didn't know if I really wanted people in my business like that, right?
Right.
But once he did that, I was like, all right, well, here we go. I guess this is going to play out in the public. So then I'm posting photos of us together and I'm doing the whole thing. But, you know, thank you for bringing this up because I really didn't. I've minimized how much of an impact that the social media part and how men know this, right? Because I don't think I've ever gotten that many likes on anything I've ever posted in my fucking life than when I said I'm in a relationship.
Yes. Now, if you would have put down graduated college, okay, that's great. But in a relationship, now everyone is invested. Everyone is happy. All these hearts, all these likes. And it's a setup. They know exactly what they're doing. Because how many of us could step up in that moment and say, that ain't my man. Mm-hmm. And there's also this sort of, how much of myself do I want to reveal online? Like some of this has to be private because the more people involved with their comments, now I've lost the plot, right? I've lost this sort of privacy and they know that. They know it. And so you're going to face public ridicule. And that's a core part of being a woman that's buried deep, deep, deep in the subconscious. You keep that inside. You don't tell people your business, right? And now that everyone knows, now they know, okay, now with the pictures, but it's such a subtle, slippery slope. And they intuitively know exactly what they're doing.
Yep. Yeah, they intuitively know. Again, they're not having these conscious thoughts like I'm going to make her post me on social media so that she gets bullied if we break up. They don't think like that. There's just, you know, and I think I understand this a lot just, you know, being a white woman and understanding that I understand power without consciously understanding it. And so when I look at things, I'm like, oh my God, I know, even though I didn't know. So if I know, that means men know. That means men know.
They know,
you know what I mean?
Exactly what they're doing. And when I think about it, I didn't understand these things the way I understand them now. I thought I did. I thought I knew a lot. You know, in fact, I was on television at this time. So I'm on the news in Las Vegas. Do you hear me? I'm on the news, girl. And and guess what? I'm on the news talking about domestic violence.
Oh my God, that's so embarrassing.
Yes. And I go home and I'm terrified. And the producer on the show, I love her. I'm scared to tell her what I'm going through. But I'm speaking with so much authority. And this is what I'm experiencing. And they know what they're doing. I don't care what anyone says. They know. They know. And it's all on purpose. All of it.
And then what's also fun, I will say that, so the two other things is that as a storyteller, I've always known to not tell a story when you're in a story. So now, in all the stories ever on stage, I always had some distance from them and clarity and wisdom, because it's like not thoughtful to the audience to tell something you haven't, a story you haven't really figured out. But here I am being forced to tell a story in real time as a comedian, right? And as a person who posts. And so what happened is, in the beginning, I started posting because I also, and like I said in the story, I had never really had a boyfriend. So all my travels, I've been alone. With him was the first time I ever got a hotel room with a man. You know, I was 36, you know, never had a hotel room, never been on a roller coaster with a man. Like, I was like, oh my God, this is what it's like to date. Because I also, even though now I see it as a source of pride, but I was embarrassed that, you know, at 36, I'd never had a boyfriend. I never had a real one that wasn't self-induced, but like a real one.
Yeah.
And he also, and I didn't go into that in this story much, but like, I ended up not having to, but I found a source of healing by, you know, hooking up with a ton of men on Tinder after I had a break after this to heal the sexual trauma, because this is the first person who ever, like, I ever had a real orgasm with. And so it was tied to this man, right? And he also, like, wooed me with that and drew me in with that, because I was so cut off from I didn't realize it's because I'm a survivor, like, you know, like, I didn't realize there was a reason why I was so disassociated from my body. Like, I also left out from this story that I thought of while I was listening to it, that him touching me and holding my hand and stuff like that, that was so important to me, because I literally had to go to a massage therapist to learn how to be touched in a way that's not associated with sex, right? My best friend Liz, would try to hug me, and she stopped trying to hug me, and I was like, why don't you hug me? She was like, 'cause I don't think you like it. And I was like, I don't. And she was like, yeah, but I can see that, so I'm not going to hug you. And I was like, well, thank you. Everyone else I hugged, because I know that's like that. I don't want to make them feel self-abandonment, right? I don't want to feel. So going into that, I didn't have any like sensual experiences with anybody. Didn't have any just human touch. So to have a man show up and he's caressing me and touching my face, and as somebody who'd been consciously trying to work on being touched and it not feel of like a violation and not feel immediately disassociate. It felt like healing. It felt new and good, right? And then on top of that, now I have my first like for the first time. I feel like a woman now for the first time. And he opened up that door, right? And then a few months in, wouldn't sleep with me. Like he used sex as like the switch and bait kind of thing, right? And then would be like, you're a sex addict. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, what are you talking about? Like, he started just, man, he was hitting they are so smart. Like, not smart, but like they are so good at figuring, they're like, oh, that one, relationship with their body, and using all of them, right? But thank you for also mentioning the photo on Twitter, because I didn't realize so much later, to just a couple years ago, seeing my vulva, I call it a vagina on the story, but my vulva on Twitter as a profile photo was the first time I've ever seen it.
Oh, wow.
Because I never held a mirror down there. You know, my relationship with my sexual or like my vulva and all that stuff, I had such a traumatizing, it's like they were just cut off practically. Like, either I'm, you know, all in, like, let's have hate fucks, but disassociate, or just don't fuck with men at all. So to realize that that's the first time I ever saw it was a photo that he took of me while I was asleep and used as a profile photo. And I kind of laughed at that part in the story. And it wasn't until years later of like me even acknowledging that is such a huge violation and illegal, you know?
It's an assault. It really is. And thinking about, there are a couple things about that. Once again, remember, they're so intuitive and they pick up on micro shifts in our face. And so I'm sure intuitively he knew the first time touching you not to go all in. He knew to create that safety, to let that guard down, right? And that's why you were able to really experience that for the first time, because he got you to relax and to trust him,
Yeah.
which is the first thing that has to happen, right?
Yeah.
And so he knew what to do. And you described that very well, how he touched you, he caressed you, and he made you feel so comfortable. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was setting you up so that he can start pulling these strings and tie your mind into knots. And so he's getting you to think his thoughts, right? And then flipping everything around on you. And that withholding of sex, that's very common too. But don't they make it seem like it's women that do it?
Yeah. And, like, it's like kind of that thing of like reverse sexism. Like, that's not a thing, right? Reverse racism, that's not a thing.
That's
like,
not a thing.
like they say women withhold sex, and like the big thing is like, we can't withhold something that's not yours, right? Whatever.
Right.
But I hate it when people just flip it as if it's exactly the same with women. It's like, it's not the same. I don't think you understand. Like, they literally, there's a power dynamic, and also usually a lot of trauma for a lot of women around sex, and including sleep trauma. I didn't realize how much trauma I had around sleep. And it basically, when he came in that, like the rape scene, that's why I was asleep. So almost every time I've been, raped or assaulted was while I was trying to rest, sleep,
You're most vulnerable.
Most vulnerable. So, there's so many things that I actually, like, even Gabby Petito's story. Did you see the documentary? Gabby Petito?
Watch it.
I know, I
recommend
get
it, but
it.
it's so triggering. I saw
get it.
like 5 minutes and I'm going to break down. I can't handle this.
I kind of felt, I try to honor myself and what's, like, I love to use my story to help. But I'm also in a place where I try not to self-abandon in doing that. And it's, it's a balance, right?
It's a balance.
And sometimes I underestimate how much something is going to truly rattle me, right?
Me too.
And I did watch that documentary partly because I feel uniquely tied to that story, and that, like, not many people that I know who are talking about this have lived in a truck or a van, and there's so many similarities. And so I did I made myself watch it, but it was, as hard as it was to watch, it was very validating, because this man, the whole thing started when he took her phone. He took her phone because the phone is the access to the outside world, to help, to, 911 or whatever. He took her phone. And so that's when they started fighting. He also was threatening suicide. Like, it was all there. He was cool, calm, and collective when he was talking to the cops, when there was a witness there now.
Yep.
Whereas before, so I did actually, and seeing how crazy she looked, knowing what was actually happening, I was like, I actually understood. And I forget I think maybe there's another word for it now. Reactive abuse. Is there another word for that? What is it? Was there something better? Because I hate that phrase.
I hate that word too, but I haven't heard of something better.
Okay. So when I saw that, I started to understand that, because I had always in the back of my mind, because the gaslighting goes deep and the self blaming goes deep, that maybe I was the abuser after all, because even though he'd done all this stuff, there was that one time where he was like stonewalling me, and I was just like, ah! And, so on his back, like, imagine this, I just went, what's wrong with you? I just like did this, almost like a massage therapist would. I didn't hurt him. I didn't hit him. And I had replayed that so many times, being like, maybe I'm actually was the abuser, and we were both abusers because of that one thing. And that's a Gabby Petito. She had scratched it. She thought she was the abusive one. And then the cops were like, yeah, maybe we can arrest you for domestic violence, but, we're going to let you off this time. I didn't understand how important that was to my story and helping me forgive myself and, like, really understand what happened until I saw her story. I mean, I'd seen it in the news and understood it, but when I watched the whole thing, and then watching her blame herself, but also be like, just so confused, man. She looks crazy. But of course she's crazy. She's she got someone gaslighting her all the time,
Right. And here's the thing. It's everything that we're taught about domestic violence and these type of abusive relationships. They have this sort of, you know what I mean? Like, this woman overcomes and she's like this amazing being, but we don't really talk enough about the psychosis that can be induced, the delusional thinking that can be induced when someone is terrified and they're under a lot of trauma. And so when you start to be like, am I the one? Did I really do this? Because we could never imagine ourselves hurting someone, right? But what I learned is, and my ex was like 6 feet tall. Yeah, this man is like 200 pounds. What am I, 5'7", 140? Me doing anything to him is annoying. Him doing something to me could take me out, right?
Yeah.
And so they're not the same. It's not a tie. But the way they make it seem, well, you abuse me, you hit me. And then you're like, well, I would never do that. And you start to feel so bad. Like, I'm not that person. And then you want to prove that you're not that person.
Yeah.
But it's not the same thing at all.
Yeah.
At all. And it took me years to accept that. Years.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the other thing. Like there's a whole power thing there, like physical power in this scenario where it's not the same. You cannot, it's apples and oranges. It's never the same.
Right.
Yeah, and it's funny because the other thing, the Gabby Petito story was, he was totally a homosexual. He never worked. She's working like, I forget, like 80 hours a week at Taco Bell to save up. That was her van. Like when I had no idea how much of a homosexual that man was until that documentary. I was like, and that also, when I told this story, I didn't understand financial abuse, right? I did not understand it at all. I don't even think I even mentioned it other than maybe I mentioned, I forget, but I am still recovering from the financial part of this, right? Yeah. Like I went into so much debt and then also like missed so much work and so much like, this, if he had access to my bank accounts, he absolutely would have stolen all of it. But the stuff that I paid for everything, he didn't pay rent. He paid, and part of me was proud of myself for him not paying rent because I thought, well, as long as he doesn't pay rent, this is still my apartment. Little did I know that, like, whether he paid rent or not, he thinks it's his apartment. He's going to do whatever he wants. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I just constantly minimized. I still and that's why really listening to other survivors and them talking about all these things that I just didn't think of. I didn't realize that men peeing on you was common around in abuse. And I forgot that detail till I heard a woman on TikTok tell that story. She's like, oh yeah, narcissists, they love to piss on you in the shower. I also didn't realize the showering detail I mentioned in that story.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that that's actually common. A lot of these men, like there's several women told their stories where like their partner always made them shower with them. And I was like, that's what he did. Because at first it was cute. I was like, oh, is this what couples do? Because he also exploited the fact I'd never been in a relationship. So, I was like, oh, okay. Oh, cool. We shower together. I didn't realize that we're doing couples things. But like a few times, fine. But this fucking cold. The shower's only hitting one person. It's right. And I didn't realize that was one of his ways of control. Like I always had to shower with him. Right. And then he's peeing on me when I'm not looking. I caught him a couple times and I was like, what?
Yeah.
All of these little ways that he was just like, I hate you. I'm going to, without even knowing it.
So it's creating a hive mind, right? The idea that there are two heads, but there's only one mind. And you have to shower with me. And so it's him being intrusive into these very personal, private moments in your life where he's just inserting himself and demanding, and you don't have the lived experience to know, I don't need to shower with you, bro. I don't need to do this. But he knew that you didn't have the lived experience. And so they overwhelmingly just step into your life and they take over. They take over. So is it cute on Valentine's Day? Of course. Yeah. But if this is something we're doing all the time, why? We're two adults. What do you mean? What is this about? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. We're not thinking that, oh, this is cute. My man, my man, my man. Do you know what I mean? We want to shower together. It's so sexy. No, it's not. Yeah, there's no reason for adults to do that. Right? Yeah. But it's this, you lose yourself and become more of him and more of what he wants and more accommodating to who he is, and the more you abandon yourself. But it's not big. You do it very slowly over time. Yeah. Very slowly.
Like, I'm sure you've noticed that I had rules Because I was like, I was always kind of at war with myself. There was like the kind of higher self, the intuitive self that was like, this is not a good idea. Come on, and went to California, took 3 weeks out there hoping that part of me hoped that he would break up with his girlfriend so we could start dating. Then the other part of me was like, I need to get this man out of my system. I need a break from him. Yeah. The distance will be good. Joshua Tree, there's no cell phone service unless I'm at the top of a climb. Perfect. Well, guess who was driving out of the park every night? A half hour so I could see if he texted me. I didn't realize even then that I was addicted to this man, right? And so then I get that text at the top of a climb. I've left her. And I was like, my first reaction is, oh no. And that to me, that's my gut reaction, was like, oh no. And then I was like, oh, well, I guess I got what I wanted. And I remember I called my best friend Liz, and I don't want to just talk about red flags in them. I want to talk about red flags in us and watching our behavior, because one of the things that I realized is that I never lied to Liz about any relationships after that. That's the first time I'd ever lied to her. And anytime I want to not tell her something, it's something I don't want to tell myself.
Yeah.
Right? And when I told her, I think I don't know if I called her or texted her from the top of that climb, I was like, oh my God, his girlfriend left. I guess we're dating now. And she goes, just because he left her doesn't mean you have to date him.
Right.
Do you want to? And it never even occurred to me if I have a choice, because in my mind, I come from a family where there was, an affair and all that stuff. And I know the harm that being the other woman can do to a family. And so, and what it did to my mom, what it did to us. And so I never wanted to be the other woman. And here I am, the other woman, right? And so a part of me was like, well, you made your bed, you better lay in it, bitch. You know what I mean? And and Liz kept saying, you don't have to date him. Do you actually want to date him? And when he was threatening to jump off the bridge, and that's what made me take him back, she literally texted, I hope he jumps. He's lying, Yes. She was like, don't pick up that phone, Melanie, please. I just kept lying to her, telling her a little truth, and then started lying a little bit more and more, because I knew it wasn't okay. And I knew she'd be legitimately worried. Right. So I started lying. Right. And that to me is a big red flag, is anything that I do not want to run by a friend, that I'm embarrassed to tell a friend about someone I'm dating, is the very thing I need to tell someone about.
Exactly. And you said something else in the story that stood out to me, when the dishwasher had passed away.
Yes.
And how you were vulnerable, and how you even did a TikTok about not dating someone in transition. Yeah. And so many of us not realizing how vulnerable we really are. And I wrote it down. You said, I was lost. I was lost. And there he was, right? He was like this stabilizing force, even though so many things in my life are adrift, which is normal. That happens to everyone. But we are so vulnerable. And the way that this person, it was so random. Right? It was a drunk driving accident. And so you're just like, this is so destabilizing and unnerving, because this could happen to me. This could happen to someone I love. And it makes you really start to think about life differently. And here's this man who wants to caress you and love you and ground it. And you talked about how gentle he was at the funeral. Yeah, with the mother. Right. And then we see this, and he can't possibly be a monster, because I've seen him do this. And I love how that's one thing, the vulnerability that we don't realize we have. And it was the same thing for me, not wanting to admit I'm vulnerable. All these amazing things about me, all the amazing things about you, you're doing, you're living your life, right? Yeah. But we're still vulnerable to life's unpredictability. And that's hard to admit, but it's not hard to see. It's not hard to see at all. And they see it.
And I also think, since learning, the more I hear, was it Trevor Noah that said some men want to have an exotic bird to put in a cage or something? Like I really, now I look back, I thought that an abuser wouldn't be attracted to someone like me, right? Because I'm a strong, powerful. Yeah. No, first of all, he saw the cracks. And also the thrill that they get from turning you into this, because I think we've talked about this before. One of my things, parts of myself that I love the most about myself is I'm just really enthusiastic. Like, I think I said the Jane Goodall of people. I love people. I love life in general. Like I just have a lot of. I'm just excited about stuff, and I was dead inside by the time I got out of that relationship. People didn't recognize me. My face looked different. My eyes. Like that, you can tell in someone's demeanor, their eyes, their face. I looked haggard, right? And that energy. I didn't even have I used to get up and dance to techno music every morning as a way to be like, And also as a writer and a storyteller, I release kind of the story. It kind of helps me start parts of the story out by dancing and being silly first. I remember realizing I was a shell of a human when I couldn't dance. When I got up and I just didn't have it in me to do this thing I love anymore. I was just so physically exhausted by this man. And it was a combination when that moment where you're talking about, I didn't really think about it as the destabilization of like someone dying and, your own mortality and someone I love could die. And also he was just like, me and the dishwasher, like we just had this really pure friendship, it was just, we just loved each other. We didn't even know each other very well, but I was always like, oh my God, Daryl. And he was like, my name. It was like just mutual enthusiasm for the spirit of each other. And for that violent thing to happen so suddenly and violently, I didn't really realize how big of that impacted me, but that with my book not selling, this thing I'd worked a year and a half on, went into like $10,000 in debt to hire an editor to help me with. And I found out like days before that it didn't sell. And my whole life, I don't want kids. I never thought about getting married. My creative life is everything to me. And he knew that. So to have that news, and I was like, why am I in New Mexico? What am I doing? I'm waiting tables at a pizza place. Like all that time in New York was for nothing. I'm right back in Taos, just whatever. And then I see this man, and this is what they do. They show up when someone dies. They show up when something happens, a loss, something where you're really vulnerable. And they come in and they just help all of a sudden. This helpful person comes in. I've seen it time and time again. And even if it's not a loss, like that's why I made that TikTok, because I heard a woman tell a story about like her mom had died or something. And that is when this man, who she had never wasn't interested at all. He showed up and he wrote a really nice card and then started working on her. And she ended up in the worst relationship. And so someone dying, losing your job, moving to a new town, anything where you are destabilized and one of your senses of community, financial security, new place, like those things, grief make you so vulnerable. And that is the moment these predators, that's why I'm like, please do not date anybody in that state, because usually, not always, but usually the people who show up, well, they know, they know.
Can tell. Yeah. And so for me, my first semester, this 2011 when this happened, my first semester teaching as a professor, I must have been 32 or 34. And first semester, and my student committed suicide. Oh. And he was the smartest student in my class, the smartest. Yeah. And there were times when no one knew the answer, and I knew he knew the answer. And so I would try not to call on him, but then I was just like, Adam, what? Just say it. We all know you know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like so much promise and so much.
Right. This is a social work program. They're all training to be therapists. And to lose him, my first semester teaching, and knowing that my students needed the therapist in me to hold them together. And the day after we found out he committed suicide, we had class. And so and I walk in, everyone's crying, and we're crying together. And then here comes this new man that wants to do all these things and wants to kind of show up in my life. They can sense our vulnerability. We have to understand that we give these things off, even though we're not aware of it. And even though, I'm a new professor, this is something that me and my students still talk about 14 years later. It was devastating. And my students still text me, do you remember Adam? You're talking about Adam. That was what made me vulnerable. And so the death and then the finances, when your survival is compromised, you're vulnerable for anything, anything. And so the financial shifts, a new job, losing a job, someone passing, like these are the last time you need to be dating someone. But just like adolescents, they know that you're more vulnerable to accept their BS. You're more vulnerable. They know it. They know it. And that makes it so sinister and so cruel. It makes it cruelty at that point.
And that also leads me to the other thing I want to talk about is how I'm still shocked at how sinister and awful a human being can be. Like, I feel like before that relationship, even though I'd been through stuff in my childhood and adulthood, but like, I haven't gotten that close to the sun. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes I feel like I will never be able to return to the old Melanie because I didn't realize anyone could be that cruel. I didn't know. So I constantly, and I think a lot of women who either don't have any dating experience or maybe are just, I don't know, like I'm kind of gullible, even though I'm like this tough. There's a part of me that's always been very gullible. I always like to believe in the best in people. I always give the wrong people, like the wrong men, especially a chance. And then I'm very suspicious of not anymore, but was very suspicious of people who have very good intentions, right?
Right.
And so I didn't know that anybody would fake their death. You know, he faked his death.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know anybody would, like, there was new levels of low that I didn't realize any human could go. And so I was pissed that he took, and I hate to say an innocence away because it feels like a childish thing to say, but I feel like he robbed me of any sense of innocence because now I know what men are capable of, and I kind of hate that. Yes. I hate that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do. And what I learned, and I never knew the definition of insanity. I never knew it until my experience. I always thought insanity was like, I see green people. You know what I mean? I see dead people. I thought that's what insane meant. But insanity is a disproportionate response to reality. Disproportionate response to reality. And so once I had that lens, now I can interpret and I can size someone's behavior and someone's reaction. Because back then I couldn't tell what was too much. Like that his reactions were really disproportionate to what was going on. And that is an indication that someone is unstable. They are truly unstable. They're not jealous. It looks like jealousy. They're unstable. Right. And someone that has these explosive and even the over the top affection, the over the top grand gestures. Yeah. That's disproportionate. That's inappropriate. Yeah. I didn't know. And I was a therapist. I didn't know.
I know.
I didn't know.
I can't imagine
you know
how much
shameful?
that would mess with you. Oh my God, no. So I was thinking that like, oh, it's so embarrassing being like, you know, a storyteller, feminist, I don't need anybody, and then I end up with literally like the most biggest misogynist possible. But being a therapist, I can imagine the level of like shame. And like, how could you not know that, that like this being so cruel to yourself in terms of what you should have known because you're a therapist, as if you don't have your own trauma.
Right. Like I'm not human. And with trauma, this is what helped me understand the nuance of trauma. First of all, what we know about trauma comes from a lot of white men that have a very privileged background that have never experienced trauma. And 9 times out of 10 have not even been inconvenienced in their life. Do you understand what I'm saying? Minor inconveniences spiral them out. And so the thing with trauma, and you just mentioned it, a lot of times we can't tell the cops from the robbers. We really can't. We really can't discern who has good intentions and who is self-motivated. We can't tell. You can't tell because the messages got crossed growing up because you're supposed to love me. I'm talking about our family of origin, but you're hurting me the most. So how am I supposed to know what love and safety is when this is where I'm supposed to feel those things, but this is where I'm the most afraid? So it becomes very confusing and the instability becomes our blueprint. And so when someone activates instability, that means love and home to us. And someone that's just chill, cool as a cucumber, that's not reality. I don't know what that is. This is not safe. I don't trust you. Right? But the person that feels like home, and this woman wrote this, it stays with me. You have to be careful what feels like home when home was the mouth of a shark. Home was the mouth of a shark. And that is what home is to victims of childhood trauma, the mouth of a shark. And so when someone activates that, you feel so comfortable because now I'm finally home.
Yeah. No, exactly. That's how I mean, that's what I really I didn't realize until years later after I told this story, how much more work, because other things have come up and I've been working through, how much, like, I was just set up to be in a dynamic like this, because if there's someone in your family who's supposed to be the protector and who's giving you love, survival means you have to make excuses for them. You have to blame it on yourself. You have to, like that, you have to for a long period of time so you don't die, right? So they keep feeding you and all that stuff. So then you go out into the world. Of course you're going to do that and so I even, like, one of my old mentors put it into like a really good metaphor for me. She was like, I feel like for you, if something feels comfortable for now, it's probably really bad. And if it feels uncomfortable, it's probably really good. You know? And she was like, and now it's not so much that way. Some of it is still the default, but at least I recognize it. But now, especially after being with Anthony so long, it doesn't feel unnatural and weird to just be considered and being loved and being feeling safe. That feels like totally good now. But you know, and when I first started like having healthy relationships, I was like, oh, and I was always trying to create problems and try, you know what I mean? I didn't trust it. But she was like, imagine if you were walking on your hands your whole life. And then one day you're like, this is not working. And you try to walk on your legs. You don't know how to walk on your legs. You're going to look like the Little Mermaid for a while. Wobble, wobble, wobble. And you've been seeing everything upside down. So it is upside down until you kind of get used to and practice, which is why it's not that you should just isolate and not, I do believe we heal in relationships. I agree. But I do believe lower stakes relationships, you know, closer friendships, like we can heal all this stuff. But a lot of this trauma, just like my sister predicted, like I said in the beginning, came up in relationships, and especially the safe ones. The way I didn't realize how much my ex had traumatized me until, here's an example, and I don't go into it in that story. He cooked some dinner. He's French, so of course food's important, right? And so he cooked something, and I was like, and he worked hard on this. I forget what meal it was. And I was like, I'm going to have something else. I'm not really interested in that. And I also used to have like an eating disorder for like a long time. So now I'm like have neutrality around it, but like I don't eat things I don't want to eat anymore. Right. But out of like people pleasing. Right. And so I was like, I don't really want it. And he was like, come on, babe. I like worked on it all day. Can't you just try it? And I was like, no. And then he was like, just disappointed. And I was like, come here, and I was like, whoa, this feels outsized. Well, one of the worst moments of my relationship was when, he'd kind of done this, but this was like the most telling, is that he wanted to make me elk soup. Okay. I was a vegetarian. So that's another level of like mouth rape, is making me eat meat that I don't even, Yeah. And like and it wasn't that thing. I couldn't say no, because you know how anger goes. If you say, I don't really want to eat that. Oh, and it's a whole thing. And the whole thing is about and so you just end up self-abandoning over the dumbest things because it's not worth it. So I'm sitting here on the couch watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I would never watch on my own. You know, I was like, this is the dumbest movie. I'm high because now I smoke weed too, even though I haven't done that since high school because I don't really like it. He had also gotten me to smoke, which also broke my boundaries down, and I couldn't see straight. And I'm high, I'm watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I'm eating something I don't want to eat, that I would never eat, all so he won't get mad. And I felt that to me almost felt worse than like the rape, you know, because it's 3 levels of self-abandonment and not even recognizing myself. And it kind of, I I just remember being like, that being a moment where I realized I don't even know who I am anymore. Who am I? Right? You lose yourself with a person like this. So here I am wanting to blow up on my husband because he's asking me to try something he spent shopped for, cooked, and whatever. And I'm like, now. And so he just sees it as, so immediately he's like, okay, this is about something much different. So many things come up in our relationship where I didn't even realize I had trauma around it until something triggers it. And so thank God I have my friends, my community who help me see the true from the false, because this stuff comes up and you're like, wait, is this a red flag that I need a divorce? You know, I mean, I literally would, I have almost blown up this relationship so many times because I went from A to Y, you know, in like a matter of seconds as a way, like you said before, to undo the past.
Yes.
To think, oh, no one's doing this to me again.
Right.
Nope. Not on my watch. And then here's this like amazing person I don't actually want to divorce and I love truly. And I'm at war with myself and I can't think straight. And so you really need a strong community of people who are going to call you on your crap gently and tell you, no, that's not what's happening here. Who know you, who know them, you know, who can help you see through this mind fuck that continues to happen, 10 years later, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is why I was laughing at the end of that story. I'm unbreakable. I'll never. Okay.
I think one of the things that you mentioned that I really want to touch on, and really I would like for you just to talk a little bit more about it, was you really emphasized that he's not a monster. Like that's the first thing that I wrote down. And you really, really emphasize that, like, these men are our brothers, they're pastors, they're people. He's a person. And I love how you stepped out of black and white thinking from the standpoint of like any man who abuses a woman is a monster. And so when we think that way, that's what we're looking for. We're not realizing that this is a person, and this is the same person that was very gentle caressing you, even if his motivation was manipulative, he's still that person. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so can you talk more about were you always able to see him as a person and not as a monster, or did you get there?
So I think I actually ended up talking a little bit about, I have another hour-long podcast called One of the Boys. And I really think, having worked with teenage boys and worked with mostly men and been like a tomboy myself and just really relating to men more than women, partly out of an own internalized misogyny, pick me cool girl crap, but partly just because, and even now, like Anthony's kind of more the like heart of our relationship. I'm kind of the dude still, like I'm just, you know, I'm not like naturally nurturing. That's just not who I am, but I can be. And I'm soft now. I'm wearing a dress right now. Look at me. I would never do that in the past, right? So I'm trying to be more in the middle. But even though they've traumatized me so much, I love men, right? And so there's that. And I worked with a teenage boy on one of these 23-day backpacking courses who was 14 at the time and whose stepfather was abusing his mom. He was terrified. He went crazy in the woods trying to, because he was so worried about her. He was going crazy. He couldn't call. He knew she was dead. Like, he was her protector because he's a big guy. He's only 14, but he was finally big enough to protect his mom. And my ex, his dad had abused his mom, and he could have made all this up, but his dad, he fought with his dad to save his mom's life. There's all this stuff. His mom was a victim of domestic violence, and he saw himself as a protector. And I just remember I kept, and maybe almost to a fault, because I think I excused his behavior too much because I was maybe humanizing him a little too much, or like giving him too much of the benefit of the doubt. But I just remember thinking, this 14-year-old kid, if he doesn't get help, he will end up being his stepdad. Right now, I feel so bad for this kid. He's 14, you know?
Yeah.
He's lost. Like, he's so worried about his mom. What's the difference between him and this guy I'm dating now? One's an adult and one's a kid, you know? And so I kept projecting that teenage boy onto this man, which ended up, you know, me kind of not excusing his behavior, but like really not understanding how calculated it was. And I really honestly think that he is someone who is beyond help, because when I found out the last time his ex had seen him, he, had tried to choke her to death on railroad tracks. And he still, and then he cheated on me with all these women. Apparently he faked a death. I mean, I'm friends with one of the women he was cheating on me with while we were together. I found out all this later on, that he's done this to so many women. It's like there's a line of bodies. I don't think this man is, I think he's beyond being a safe person to date, right? And I also I don't know, I think a lot of it just comes from when you have people in your family that are, messed up and you love them anyway, and you see, like my dad, he did a lot of harm, but I always saw him as just trying so hard to be a better person, and he got in his own way. You know what I mean? And he's probably a monster in someone else's story. He definitely was a monster in my story on some level, and yet I loved him. So I personally, because of my family and some of the members of my family, I can't separate the humanity from the person, but almost to a fault. Do you know what I mean? I do see it as a strength, and I think I kind of leaned hard into that when I told this story. But I don't ever want to lose that insight. I don't ever want to dehumanize, because they don't just do this for no reason. Right. They're not just, hey, I'm bored, I'm just going to do this. To me, it's not that everyone who's abused becomes an abuser, but you will never convince me that anybody other than, let's say, literally are a psychopath or something. We're all that whole thing. If you don't deal with your wounds, you'll bleed out on everyone closest to you, whatever. I think the way that I've seen it in myself, the way that I've not been proud of some of my behavior in the past, the way I'm always evolving and growing, I always want to give that grace to everyone to evolve and grow and learn and do better. But maybe I'm a little too optimistic. I don't know. What do you think? Because I think you and I see eye to eye on this, but I don't know where you're coming from around the, I don't think it's helpful to call these men monsters, because they're everywhere. They're everywhere. Yeah. And that's really isolating for victims, for you to call them monsters. Because it's and that whole thing of I'm not stupid. Okay. I wouldn't have dated a monster. These men are pretend to be stuff. So I'm curious, how do you reckon with this? Because you've worked with abusers. And so you probably had to you've probably seen their humanity way more from having to try to help them, right?
For me, I had to realize that idealization isn't always positive. And idealization is dehumanizing someone. And so we often only talk about it as pedestalizing someone. We don't talk about it as demonizing someone. And seeing someone as all bad is idealizing them. You're taking away their humanity. And seeing someone as all good, you're taking away their humanity. Yeah. And so I didn't understand that nuance. And for a couple years out of the relationship, I felt like he was a monster. But because I felt like he was a monster, I couldn't see those signs in other people that didn't present as aggressive, that weren't argumentative or jealous. Yeah. Because a lot of people who are manipulative in that way and emotionally abusive present as depressed, as really pitiful. I can't figure this out. And they control you with that. But they don't present as monsters. They present as victims. Yes. And so you have a different reaction, right? But as long as I wasn't looking at a person, then I couldn't make healthy choices. But then that also cast me in this sort of shameful space. Because like you said, okay, so I was in love with a monster. What does that say about me? Yeah. Right? How can I find my humanity when I'm taking it away from someone else? And so that is a healing process. And I think it takes a lot to come to that. That's a world view where you start to realize that, a lot of people that no one would think are this way, they are exactly this way. Yeah. And if you, like I said, if you only see a monster, you can't see the baseball coach who's doing this to his wife because you only see a baseball coach. You're only seeing one slice of them, understanding that they are complex. And I think that shift allows us to make healthier choices about the people that are in our life. And we can see them in totality and not overemphasize what we like or even overemphasize what we don't like.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because that's the thing is like there were so many red flags, but I overemphasized the green flags. Like he cares about his daughter. Now, of course, at the end, I realized that he is literally just using his daughter to get to women because he never sees her, doesn't pay child support. He just shows photos of her all the time. Like he's a good dad. But how perfect is it that someone who has like, whose dad left when I was 4 because of an affair and who just all this other stuff, how perfect would I be like, oh, wow, he loves his daughter. Green flag.
Yeah.
And then all these other things of him saying, like, bragging about never hitting a woman, which to me, I was like, he was like, I've never hit a woman. I was like, why are you saying that? Where did that come from? Like, all these like huge red flags. I also wanted to hit on, because I don't want, like, I know we can't go on forever, and you and I could, but one of the things I also wanted to mention was, I want to be careful because I did at the end of that story. I was like, now I know if, I can tell by texting if he's a narcissist. I was like, oh my God, no, I couldn't. Because I definitely ended up hanging out with some unhealthy men, by ignoring red flags or just being like, no, I'm being too harsh or whatever after recording that. But I don't like to lean too much into like, because women, I don't know if they do this to you all the time. They're like, what are the red flags? And I'm like, dude, there is no list. Okay, I can tell you things to look for, to keep in mind, because I do think education is going to be helpful. But there's no list, because one thing that I say is actually going to be a green flag in a different context, right? It's like a food plan for relationships. It's very rigid, and the world is not like that. People are not like that, right?
No, right.
And so this idea that like, you're always you can never. They're kind of like that thing, well, I could never end up in a cult. Those are the very people who end up in cults, right? It's just like cocky and overconfident, right?
Yep.
So I realize that I have to ride this middle place of like, I don't want to be somebody who's like, these are all the red flags and because that is also very, like that's kind of like victim shamey and whatever, right? Like and I also think that it was empowering when I went back and I read some of my notes. I took notes, and I encourage women to take notes in their relationships, especially if there's problems, because those notes help me stay grounded. It's like, the facts, because my mind is all over the place. And when I go back, and sometimes I've read them in videos or TikTok, I'm like, look at this. I was like, I don't understand. He never works. And I was like, I knew all of this and I was taking notes. I noticed it. Whereas when I think back, I was just dumb and stupid and was totally, no, I knew. And so I like to look at it as like, it's like going to the intuition gym, right? It's like my intuition all the time was like, hey, right? And yet I was like, nah, it's fine. It's no big deal. What's the worst that could happen? And I was ignoring my intuition. But there's a lot of things that I knew, but I just didn't want to see because I had trauma, childhood trauma, my nervous system dysregulation, being gaslit, lied to, I had all these things, enjoying sex for the first time, like all these things working against my intuition. And at the same time, the other thing, and maybe you know about this, is it my intuition or is it a trauma response? Which is the intuition? Yeah. Because my intuition tells me that person's dangerous. Like, no, you're projecting. This is something else. And so, I like, there's no list that will keep you safe. Anyone can end up with an abuser again. And there are a lot of things that you can do. One is work on your community, date in community, or have relationships in community so that you are never assessing all this on your own. Right? Practice trusting your intuition and dating yourself, having a relationship, getting to know yourself, like all these things. And, therapy, dealing with all this stuff. And at the end of the day, like, I could probably end up in a terrible situation at some point too. Because who knows, in a vulnerable moment, someone dies, maybe I miss all that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But that, to me, I didn't realize that is really the best place to sort of live your life from the standpoint of, listen, I'm capable of this. I'm capable of someone being very attractive and me overvaluing that over other things about them. I've done that. So 9 times out of 10, if I've done it in the past it's possible it can happen again. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's just certain things in men that I really like. And when I see someone, I always say, because I like tall men, I'm like, anything over 6 feet, I'm going to give you those red flags. So if you 6'4", you got 4 red flags that we're going to have to just work with. You know what I'm saying? Because I know what I like. I know what my aesthetic is. I love the tattoos, girl.
Yeah.
And so I know that I have a vulnerability. Okay. I have a vulnerability. I was traumatized. My father died in front of me. Okay. He was, I look just like this man. Do you understand?
I look just like my dad too.
I look just like him. The big head, you know what I mean? Big old eyes. Like, this is my reality. So there is that pain that lives in me that I don't even know about. And there are times that it's going to be activated. And I have to allow that to exist. Like, this is who I am. I'm fantastic, but I'm also a survivor of trauma.
Yeah.
And that means that certain people are drawn to me and I'm drawn to them. Okay.
Yeah.
And that also means that I need other people to hold me and help me make these choices. I can't make them on my own. I can't, because I'll end up with somebody 6'5", tattoos, with all kind of problems, and I'm trying to fix it. And I'm not realizing what I'm doing, because when that part of me is activated, it feels so much like me.
Yeah.
So much like me. And so the humility says that I need help in this area of my life. I need people that love me. I need my therapist. I need my support group. I need other people that help me to stay healthy. I can't do it on my own. And admitting that is what helps me to stay free.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's that community piece, because I think a lot of survivors kind of go to like, I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't ever get close to anyone again. And you can't, you can work on yourself on your own, some, but in my experience, like the real healing is within community, being in, I mean, right out of the gate, I almost like hooked up with 4 different dudes while Anthony went out of town when we first started dating, because I was assumed that he was going to hook up with people. So I was like, well, if he's going to hook up, I'm going to fuck 4. I had dates set up, and I was like, wait, maybe I should run this by somebody. I did. People who knew me and knew him, they're like, that's not what's happening. And why are you doing this? Do you really want to hook up with 4 dudes? And I was like, not really. And they're like, why are you doing it? I was like, oh, it's because I don't like feeling vulnerable.
Yeah.
I'd rather just burn this thing down and just in case, and so it ended up, leading to a really beautiful conversation and on all this, like it was like a practice in, am I going to let this being activated destroy something, or am I going to use the resources in my little toolbox, right? I got my Liz, I got my mentors, I have, and also like a French man friend who knows French men, because the dating culture is different. So I like ran it by, and everybody was, no, dude, that's not what's happening here. And so I didn't do it. And I realized if I had done that, I would have felt awful about myself, because I wasn't doing it for pleasure, for fun, for connection. It was literally because I'm afraid of feeling vulnerable, and I'm projecting him cheating because my ex was cheating with all these people. Right. So I fully agree. Like I think being too cocky or being like isolating or like either extreme is not a good place, because that's how you actually end up being targeted again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what makes us vulnerable. And then I think is just to go back to community.
Yeah.
And it takes a community to heal a wounded inner child. It takes a community. And it's a journey that never ends.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to add was the also thing that I didn't realize was creating so much stress for me was working with somebody, like that, the added thing of working with my abuser, because I didn't want to create drama. I was so afraid of upsetting everyone else or whatever. There's so many factors that kept me in this thing, but that's a whole nother thing. Yeah, I kind of feel like I think I've said everything I wanted to talk about. Is there any final thoughts that you have on this? Because I feel like, I have one more thing. Do you? You go first. Do you want to go first?
I like I really wanted to highlight what you said in the beginning. You said to not tell the story while you're in the story, to
Yeah.
allow yourself time to heal and detach. And you also spoke about learning, and it's not the same story. You're not telling the same story twice. And
Yeah.
so you're telling the story from a different vantage point at this time in your life. And I can't emphasize that enough. And switching the way that you talked about it now, there are details that you added in that make it clear why you were vulnerable, why things got to the point of where they got. You know what I mean? And so I really think that that's very important, to tell the story different times in your life and then see how the story changes.
Yeah, I think that to me is an indicator of growth and healing, because honestly, when I look back, because I've told a lot of stories on podcasts and stuff, and I'm like, I'm not embarrassed by any of my stories, but if I ever told any of those stories exactly how I told any of them years ago, there's something wrong.
Right.
Probably.
Right.
Maybe unless it's like a very like classic story, but if it's about dating or anything like that, there's probably, I want to look at my life differently. I want to have learned more. I don't want to stagnate. I want to like really, this whole life is about really knowing myself, and also knowing that I'll never fully know myself, because I'm always learning and growing. So who I am today, totally different than 5 years ago, definitely different than 10 years ago, and so on and so forth, you know? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that just for people in general, because we're storytelling as an art. It's very similar to storytelling as that's what we do. Therapists, you know, I didn't realize I was coaching storytellers that I was like, I kind of feel like I'm a therapist on some level, but with no training, because they're telling me their story, and the way they're framing it says a lot. You know what I mean?
Yes.
There's one thing I actually wanted to hit on in the very beginning, was the chemistry thing. You know, that was when I said that this was the first guy I'd had chemistry with. And of course, I actually learned on TikTok from hearing all these survivors talk about chemistry, and that, all the butterflies and stuff. I had no idea that that's like not a good thing. That was every movie I'd ever watched was like, oh my God. And it doesn't mean that there's not like something, but it's not like, it's not the panic or butterflies or just like outsized excitement, because I didn't feel that at all with Anthony. I felt so calm.
Yes.
Right. But with this guy, I was like, I was so nervous. I was literally, and I felt high from how nervous I felt around him. And I had no idea that was my body being like,
yes. Yes. I wrote that down. The intensity versus intimacy, and how we can confuse the two. And that intense reaction is that fear response. Like, this is too much, too fast. And you also mentioned that when he would be jealous and upset, that he was drunk. He was drunk with emotion. He was emotionally intoxicated.
Yeah.
But that intensity is an emotional intoxication of itself. But we don't see it as that, because it's like, woo, you know what I mean? Like a roller coaster. But that's overstimulation, which is problematic. That's overstimulation. That's not intimacy. That's intensity.
And that, which actually leads to the final thing I wanted to make sure I hit on, was why I thought leaving was like, that was the thing. Those are just a couple examples I mentioned in the story about him being like, I got shot last night. You know, I sewed it up with dental floss and, a needle. And I'm like, this crazy stories, but why am I still talking to this person? I could not cut this man off. I could not go contact. Not only could I not go no contact, I would tell myself, for my safety, I'm checking his Facebook page to see where he is at. What's he doing? But every time I do that, I've got his voice in my head, all that stuff. I was addicted to this man, right? Yeah. And so those first 3 or 4 months after that relationship, my whole nervous system, I felt like I had been using, heroin or something, and now I'm going through withdrawals, and it lasted for months.
Yes.
And I didn't trust myself to not call him. I literally had to bring someone else into it, to being like, I know I'm going to call him. I miss him. Even though, and my friend was like, I literally helped you get out of the state of New Mexico alive. Why are you still talking to him? And I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
God.
It's so shameful. Like, we carry that shame, but that's biology. That's physiology. That's what happens with this intermittent reward breadcrumb,
Yeah.
breadcrumb. I'm in Las Vegas. I tell people all the time, dating someone like this is just like pulling the lever at the casino. The
Yeah.
lights, the excitement, once again, the overstimulation, then they take it all away. And now you have hit the floor. You're flat. Bring me back. Give me that emotion back. That push, pull, hot, cold. That is the addictive cycle. And so it works if it's a man. It works if it's the casino. It works if it's drugs. It doesn't matter. This is our brain. This is not our personality.
Thank you for saying that. It
true.
did feel like, and it takes, and it's hard to not go back to it. And I think it makes total sense to me why, the statistic about women going back like 7, and.
But let me stop you there. Going back, this is what I really want to bring home. It takes a woman on average 7 times to leave an abusive relationship. It takes an alcoholic on average 7 times, 7 tries to get sober.
Oh, I never heard that.
7 times, 7 tries, 7 attempts at rehab. That number, they're the same because it's the same process. It's the same process.
Yeah, you and I both have talked about how the people don't take relationship addiction seriously, and and I've had, like I struggled with food on a level I literally thought I was going to die from bulimia and stuff. It was like a 20-year battle. None of that made me feel like my life was in danger and as powerless and hopeless as one relationship did.
Yeah.
I was put on my ass more from a relationship addiction than any like the substance or like anything. I'm not saying that it's harder. I'm just saying for me, this one is like life threatening level. And that's why I was like, oh, I can't just date lightly. I got to take this seriously.
Yeah, absolutely.
I could die, climbing all these mountains, all this crazy stuff I did. I love that I said that in the day. I was like, I've done all this stuff. And how is it that the most dangerous thing I've ever done is let a man be in my bed, in my home, in my heart? The irony, So thank you for explaining that because that's a really important part. I don't think people talk enough about. So I don't know. This was awesome, man. I could go on and on, but I feel like really full. I feel like you helped me forgive myself even more because I actually feel like looking back, listening to, 9 year ago Melanie talking. I'm like, I wasn't like, oh my God, you stupid bitch. I was like, oh, look at you thinking, I get it. It was really compassionate rather than judgy. So that's a good sign to me, but I feel like you unlocked even more compassion for myself. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm glad. I really
Thanks
am.
for sharing your own stories too so much.
It helps. The more you talk about it, the more we allow each other to heal together.
Yeah. Which is why storytelling is so powerful. And that's just why I'm so glad I found this, and anyway, thank you so much, Aishia. I really appreciate it.
And that is that. I'll tell you, it is such an honor to be able to feature 2 such brilliant and compassionate and uncensored minds sharing on the show that way. 2 such extraordinary people. We're so grateful. You can find Melanie Hamlett on TikTok at Mel Hamlett with 2 T's, or same thing on YouTube. And you can find Miss Aishia at My Therapist Life on TikTok and YouTube. So let us know what you think of this or any of these conversation stories we've been having. Or if you've got a favorite risk story from the past that you'd like to see the storyteller come back on to discuss all these years later, leave a note on our website for this episode or post on Reddit at r/risk podcast, or you can leave a comment on this episode on YouTube, because today's the day, folks. Take a risk.